Chapter 646. Elder Yu looked at Lien Yangzi, who was still unable to calm down, and was secretly delighted. This woman and Zhang Yan's failed negotiation was exactly what he wanted. After all, he coveted those 3 transcendent artifacts and wanted to find an opportunity to obtain them. He was still thinking of finding an opportunity to incite his wife to take the lead, but now he didn't need to go through so much trouble. Lien Yangzi said angrily, "It's not like I'm asking for his magical weapon for free. At first, I wanted to talk nicely with him. If he was willing to agree in the future, if anything happens in the Shenwu Mountain, I don't mind coming out to help. But that Taoist Zhang is really despicable. He said that even if my master came, he would still say the same thing. It's really infuriating." At the side, Elder Yu advised with a smile, "There's no need for Lady Lien to be calculative with these cultivators from the other continents. They seized an immortal city by a fluke, yet they really think they're someone important. They really don't know the immensity of heaven and earth. As I said earlier, as long as Lady Lien is determined, why would you worry about not being able to obtain those few transcendent artifacts?" Lien Yangzi suddenly hesitated and said, "I heard that Chu Changji once found 4 Yuanian cultivators to fight with this person, but in the end they were defeated and fled. Presumably he has some skill, so I came to ask Old Yu for some advice." Old Man Yu waved his sleeve with a smile and chuckled. "Rumors are inevitably exaggerated. Lady Lien, there's no need to overestimate this person. Isn't that Chu Changji completely unharmed? As for Wang Guangyuan, he had only reached nascent soul a few years ago, so how much cultivation could he have? That Jiang fellow is famous for his escape technique, but I've never heard of him having any other abilities. As for the evildoer from the demon division, there's no need to worry about him." Lien Yangzi thought for a moment, then nodded lightly, temporarily accepting this explanation. Elder Yu's words seemed nonchalant, but his eyes flickered. This statement was only meant to bully a core formation cultivator like Lien Yangzi. If it was any of the Yuanian cultivators he was familiar with, they wouldn't dare to boast that they could fight against 5 people by themselves. Not to mention that Zhang Yan had casually taken out 3 high-grade profound weapons. His strength was definitely not to be underestimated. The reason why he said these words was only to help dispel Lien Yangzi's misgivings and make her willing to take the lead in this matter. He only needed to wave the flag and shout from the side. There was no need to rush forward, as long as he could do it. That would be the best. Even if they failed, they would be able to escape unscathed. Lien Yangzi frowned and thought for a while. In the end, she sighed and said, That was what he said." However, the Shenyue sect was going against the old master. "The number of people I can invite now are few and far between. I'm afraid I won't be able to make a move on this person for the time being." Elder Yu laughed heartily. "Wife Lien, how can there be no one? Yong Fu of E Mountain sect was robbed of his position as the ruler of the immortal city. Could it be that he didn't want to take it back? Chu Changji had been expelled from the family. Could it be that he didn't want to get back at her? Let's talk about that Hui Xian old ancestor. I don't believe that he would let go of the grudge of killing his disciple. Even if he can't attack himself, he would be willing to borrow 1 or 2 magical treasures to deal with that priest Zhang." Lien Yangzi thought about it carefully and shook her head, saying, "It is not appropriate to look for Chu Changji. It will be very easy for others to use against us." Elder Yu smiled again and said, "That's fine. I'm not talented, but I know quite a few fellow Taoists. When the time comes, I can invite them all to help. As long as we put on a show of trampling over their sect, even if we don't really attack, we can still make them bow their heads." When Lien Yangzi heard him say this, her eyes brightened. "How long will it take for Elder Yu to arrange this?" Elder Yu changed his mind and said, "There's no rush. If we go look for them now, they will definitely be on guard. Why don't we wait a while more? Anyway, the magical treasures won't be able to escape." Lien Yangzi bit her lip. "But in this way, those 2 magical treasures won't be able to land in the hands of my sworn brothers." Elder Yu coughed dryly and said, "Wife also knows that this is an extraordinary time. Contacting people isn't something that can be done in a day. Besides, to invite these people, it is inevitable that we will have to give them some benefits." As long as a spiritual master Yuanying had some cultivation, most of them would be in charge of a city or a sect. Usually, they would be in separate places, guarding their sect. If these people didn't have the fate or sufficient benefits, it would take at least a year to gather them in one place to work. Chu Changji, for example, as a disciple of Hui Xian's ancestor, could be said to have an extremely wide network of connections. However, in a hurry, he could only find the nearby Taoist Jiang to make up the numbers. If it wasn't for the help of the 2 Yu clan demons from the North Sea, only he and Wang Guangyuan would be able to go into action. Lian Yangzi waved her hand and said, "Forget it. Since it can't be rushed, there's no harm in planning it slowly. I can even wait for 3 or 4 years. What I'm worried about is that when my sisters hear of this news, they will act immediately and exchange the 3 magical treasures first." Elder Yu laughed, looking as if he had a card up his sleeve. "Wife Lian, you're too closely involved in the situation to see clearly. Which of those 3 spirit herbs is easy to find? Without several years of time, who can say for sure that they can be found? Not to mention other items, just that earth-crouching lotus, didn't you sweep clean the sect's original stash?" With this reminder, Lian Yangzi also came to a realization. The things that Zhang Yan needed were all rare and hard to find. Even she had spent a great deal of effort to find 12 earth-crouching lotuses. As for Shi Huanjing and Gui Kuei, there was no clue at all. Even if her sisters found them, they wouldn't be able to do it in a short period of time. At this time, Elder Yu suddenly said, "Wife Lian, can you inform the elders that all the immortal cities in the north of Great Chu are not allowed to trade with the immortal cities of Black Heart Mountain? As time passes, there will definitely be internal strife in the Divine House Mountain, and it will be easier for us to deal with them in the future." Lian Yangzi said in surprise, "What's the use of this? If the north can't trade, won't they go to the southern immortal cities to search?" Elder Yu said in a low voice, "If they have the guts to enter deep into my great Chu blessed land, then that's exactly what I'm looking for." Lian Yangzi seemed to have thought of something. She looked at Elder Yu a few more times and sighed softly, "Elder Yu, it's better to restrain some things." Elder Yu laughed softly, "Don't worry, wife Lian, I know what I'm doing." After discussing this matter, Lian Yangzi was in no mood to stay any longer, so she bid farewell and left. After sending her off, Elder Yu told the servant girl in the hall, "Go and find third master." Not long after, a cultivator walked into the hall with large strides. This person looked exactly the same as Elder Yu. As soon as he entered, he said loudly, "Eldest brother, do you have any business for this little brother to do?" Elder Yu raised a cup of fragrant tea and took a sip. He said unhurriedly, "Third brother, I have to deal with a few people in the next few months. Keep your spirits up and pay more attention to the Divine House Mountain. If anyone goes south, don't be polite. Just do it, but remember not to expose your identity." The cultivator said excitedly, "Don't worry, eldest brother, this little brother is already familiar with this. I won't cause any trouble for eldest brother." Elder Yu squinted his eyes and smiled, "That's good. Third brother, it won't be long before our Yu clan's opportunity comes." 2 months later, Zhang Yan was teaching a few disciples to deduce the runes inside the cave when he heard a boy report that Chu Mu Ran was outside asking to see him. He dismissed the disciples and ordered the boy to call him in. Chu Mu Ran's face was full of worry. After entering the hall, he first bowed and said, "Senior brother, I don't know what happened in the last few months. The immortal city of Chu has broken off trade with our Ink Heart Mountain." Zhang Yan's expression was normal. He asked, "Did you find out the reason?" Chu Mu Ran hesitated. "Junior brother Zhao has secretly asked someone to investigate. It seems that a noble from the Zhongtai sect is obstructing us." Zhang Yan's eyes flashed slightly. Chu Mu Ran bowed. "This little brother doesn't know what to do. Please make a decision, senior brother." Zhang Yan thought for a moment and said, "Junior brother, don't be anxious. This matter is easy. Arrange for someone to take my message to the West Sea Realm's Celestial Civ sect. If there's anything we need, we can buy it there. There's no need to go to Chu." Chu Mu Ran was startled and said hesitantly, "Although the Celestial Civ sect is tens of thousands of miles away from Chu, It is still a superior sect of the Zhongtai sect. If they are unwilling, Zhang Yan said, how do you know if you don't try? If there's no other way, go south. There are several immortal cities in the south vast sea realm. If that doesn't work, go to the Wu country. I heard that no matter who comes, they can trade with each other. As for the specifics, junior brother, think about it yourself. There's no need to ask me. Chu Mu ran thought for a while and felt that this was the only thing he could do for now. If he headed south to the trade fair, he would definitely be at a disadvantage without the protection of the sect. However, it was still better than being trapped in the mountains. After bowing to Zhang Yan, he left. Not long after he left, a boy came in and said, Sect Master Yong of the E-Mountain sect requests an audience. Zhang Yan, invite him in. Yong Fu walked in and greeted Zhang Yan first. After taking a seat, they exchanged a few words before saying, I'm here to bid farewell to Sect Master Zhang. After I've settled the matters of the sect, I'll leave for Chu. However, I don't know if I'll be able to return. Sect Master Zhang, please take care of the disciples of the E-Mountain sect. Zhang Yan sensed that there was something strange in his tone and asked, what happened? Yong Fu sighed and said, 10 days ago at the Southwest Dragon Pillar meeting, the Upper Zhongtai sect was defeated. 12 Yuanian cultivators died in battle, and only the sect master returned. However, Xianyu sect didn't fare too well either. 9 of them died, and I heard that the sect master also suffered serious injuries. Now, the Upper Zhongtai sect is gathering our Yuanian cultivators everywhere, hoping to win back the city at the Northwest Dragon Pillar meeting in 16 years. Zhang Yan was surprised in his heart. According to his knowledge, with the ability of the Zhongtai sect and the strength of the entire sect, they were able to gather around 40 to 50 nascent soul cultivators, yet they'd lost over 20% of their forces in a single battle. It could be said to be an extremely horrifying battle. He cupped his hands and said, I'd like to ask, what is this Dragon Pillar meeting all about? Yong Fu said in a low voice. The so-called Dragon Pillars are said to be 8 palaces left behind by an ancient immortal. They are arranged in the Dongsheng continent according to the positions of the 8 trigrams. Previously, there was a seal on them, preventing anyone from spying on them. However, in recent years, for some reason, the seal has been gradually loosened. Because they are located under the realm of the Upper Zhongtai sect and Xianyu sect, the 2 sects have coveted them. Thus, they agreed to fight to determine the ownership. The 2 sects originally had a grudge against each other, and with the addition of the Immortals' palaces, the enmity has grown. After listening to this, Zhang Yan learned that the 2 sects had fought 5 times before, and neither side had suffered great losses. However, he didn't think that so many cultivators from both sects would die this time. It seemed that they were really fighting. He raised his brows and said, although Mount Shenwu worships the Zhongtai sect as the upper sect, it's only a name. Since Sage Yong knows that the road ahead is dangerous, why must you go? Yong Fu sighed. My wife is a disciple of the Zhongtai sect. Summoned by the upper sect, I can't refuse. He paused, then smiled wryly. I heard that the Xingkong city sect master along the coast of the western lands disobeyed orders and was captured by the sect master. Stone tablets were used to suppress him in a cave. With the precedent set, how could I dare to disobey? Chapter 647. Lady Lian had wanted to wait for a few months, and after the Southwest Dragon Pillar gathering, she would gather her people and go to the Shenwu mountain to find trouble with Zhang Yan. However, she did not expect that the Zhongtai sect would lose so miserably this time, and even her 2 sworn brothers died in the formation. She had lost 2 great helpers in one go. Even though she still had the support of her clan members, her status in the sect had also plummeted. Some of the concubines who didn't get along with her usually saw an opportunity to find fault with her. Under such circumstances, she did not want to give others a handle, so she restrained herself a lot and shut herself in the door, not mentioning anything about the treasure snatching. Without a leader, elder, you would not be stupid enough to rush forward alone, so the matter was put aside just like that. No matter how bloody the battle between the 2 sects was, it had nothing to do with Zhang Yan. Taking advantage of the rare peace and quiet, He polished his skills in the cave every day, refining Jun Yang's essence, and occasionally came out to teach the secrets of cultivation methods to his disciples. Just like that, 16 years passed peacefully in a flash. In a cave in the belly of Tsangju Cave Peak, there was a large cauldron with dragon patterns placed under the hall. Thick white steam was rising from it, forming a spirit cap above the lid, hovering and lingering like a ball of cloud on the ground. There was a sound inside the cauldron, like boiling water, all signs indicating that this cauldron of pills was about to be refined. Zhang Yan sat on the high platform in the north, with Taoist Wen and Zhao Gu on his left and right respectively. Other than the two of them, there were 3 other disciples standing under the hall, looking at the cauldron nervously. Taoist Wen looked at it and said to Zhao Gu opposite him, "Junior brother Zhao, I do not understand Pill Dao. Since sect head senior brother entered the sect, you have followed him the longest, so you should be able to see something. I wonder if He Cheng and the others can successfully refine this cauldron of pills?" Zhao Gu shook his head. "It's hard to say. I have seen how diligent He Cheng and the others are in cultivating every day, but I heard that this cauldron of pills is a test of their eyesight. It is not comparable to the pills they usually refine together, so it is hard to say." At this time, Zhang Yan smiled. "Junior brothers, just wait patiently, you will see the results in a moment." The 3 disciples of the hall were called He Cheng, He Tong, and He Guang. He was originally a disciple of the Deep Abyss sect. It was just that after cultivating for 60 to 70 years, he had barely entered the realm of clear qi. His talent was ordinary. After Zhang Yan took over the sect, he intended to choose disciples to teach alchemy. The 3 of them felt that this person had no hope of achieving the great Tao. But if he could learn this technique in the sect, he would have the same glory, so he might as well give up on other thoughts and focus on this path. After 16 years of cultivation, he had gained quite a bit of insight into the Tao of alchemy. Today was the day Zhang Yan would set the test. As long as they succeeded in concocting this batch of medicinal pills, they would be able to assume the position of master of the alchemy department. They would be in charge of all the medicinal pills concocted by the sect, and in the future, any disciple who saw them would have to treat them with respect. However, if they failed, they would have no choice but to hand over the position to someone else. At this time, the sound of the cauldron was getting louder and louder, and the spiritual clouds on the lid were surging. It was obvious that the cauldron was about to be opened. The 3 of them couldn't help but feel nervous. Whether they succeeded or not, it all depended on this moment. They calmed themselves down, and at the same time, they conjured a spell and each shot a ray of light into the cauldron. The 3 of them had done this action countless times, and could be said to be very familiar with it. When the ray of light landed, it was immediately triggered. After a short while, a sound of gold and jade colliding was heard, and the lid of the cauldron was pushed out by a gust of clear air. It was about 5 to 6 feet high, and a faint light appeared within the cauldron. A thick fragrance filled the hall, and with a light breath, they felt refreshed, and their eyes and ears became sharp. Taoist Wen's eyes widened. "Is it done?" Zhao Gu stared at it, but he did not speak. For the past 10 years, the Deep Abyss Temple had opened up 1,000 acres of medicinal garden in the mountains, and planted all kinds of strange flowers and herbs. Now that they had a pill master, they no longer had to rely on the celestial city. At this time, a boy came forward and took a look. He replied, "Sect Master Jinren, the medicinal pills are done." Zhang Yan said in a clear voice, "Bring it to me." The boy placed the medicinal pills in the cauldron on a jade plate and brought it to the bottom of the stairs. He said, "Sect Master Jinren, the medicinal pills are all here." He Cheng and the other 2 did not know if they could pass the test this time, and instantly became anxious. Zhang Yan looked down. If it was him, this cauldron could produce more than 300 grand elemental pills, but now there were only 100 pills, and 40% of the ingredients were wasted. Moreover, the medicinal properties of the pills were strong and slightly lacking in gentleness, so it could not be said to be good. However, this was the first time the 3 of them had refined this pill, and to be able to reach this step was already very difficult. Zhang Yan said, "Junior apprentice brother Zhao, I usually have to guard the sect and can't leave. Zhang is also outside searching for medicinal materials, so I can only rely on you for this matter. Zhao Gu solemnly bowed and said, I dare not do my best. Zhang Yan smiled and said, I can't stay in Dongsheng continent for long, sooner or later I will return to Qinsong Mountain Gate. Before I leave, I still need to choose a leader. However, for us Taoists, cultivation is the foundation, otherwise it will be difficult to convince the masses. Junior apprentice brother Zhao, you must remember to be diligent. After listening, Zhao Gu was silent for a moment, then he bowed deeply to Zhang Yan. Zhang Yan nodded. Shen Baishuang's 3 registered disciples each had their own strengths and weaknesses. Chu Mulan was indecisive, but when it came to handling mundane affairs, he had his own methods. Although Taoist Wen had the highest mana among the 3, his personality was too unyielding. Only Zhao Gu had a steady temperament and was also the most talented, with the hope of achieving Yuaning. He was the next person Zhang Yan favored as the next leader. As the 2 of them were talking, a flying sword suddenly flew into the hall, heading towards Zhao Gu. He looked around and reached out to receive it. First, he apologized to Zhang Yan, then opened it to take a look. Unconsciously, his expression froze, and he raised his head to say, Sect Master Shixiang, this is a letter from Mount Yi Sect. It says that Jinren Yong fought with someone at the Dharma Assembly the day before yesterday. Because he was no match for his opponent, he has already passed away. As he said this, he handed the letter over. Zhang Yan raised his eyebrows and reached out to receive it. Only after reading it carefully did he understand the details. As it turned out, the day before yesterday had been a meeting between the Xianyu sect and the Zhongtai sect's northwest dragon pillar. This time, the Zhongtai sect master had brought a total of 16 Yuanyin cultivators. Apart from the 9 Yuanyin elders of their own sect, there were 7 others who had been summoned from the lower sections. Even Taoist Gong Sun of the immortal Civ sect, who hadn't left his mountain for a long time, was among them. Although the Zhongtai sect wanted to regain the face they had lost last time, the battle still ended with their defeat. 3 of the sect's elders had died, while the 7 cultivators from the lower sects, including Yong Fu and Taoist Gong Sun, had all perished. After Zhang Yan finished reading, he sighed and said, I didn't expect that after more than 10 years, Taoist Yong would actually die in body and soul. Zhao Gu said in a low voice, Sect Master Yong also had no choice. Just then, there was a flash of white light outside the cave. Unexpectedly, another letter had arrived. This time, it was headed straight for Zhang Yan. He reached out and caught it in his palm, sweeping it over his eyes. Just by looking at the mark on it, he knew it was a letter from Zhang Boyan. In the past 16 years, the 3 profound artifacts had been placed in the floating tower with no one coming to trade for them. As a result, Zhang Boyan was still running around outside, searching for spiritual plants. Zhang Yan thought that there should be a clue. He opened the letter and skimmed through it. He discovered that it wasn't about this matter, but was still related to the Dragon Pillar Assembly. In order to compete with the Xianyu cult for the Dragon Pillar Palace, the Zhongtai sect had already experienced a total of 7 Dragon Pillar assemblies. However, 16 years later, there would be another battle. This battle was especially crucial. If the Zhongtai sect won, they could fight to a draw. If they lost, they would have no hope at all. However, after experiencing 2 crushing defeats, the Zhongtai sect's vitality was greatly damaged. Not only were the sect's elders unwilling to fight, but the cultivators from the lower sects were also in danger. Under these circumstances, the Zhongtai sect master knew that it wasn't good to force too much. However, he was afraid that there would be no one available for the final assembly. As a result, he came up with an idea. He would use all kinds of rare treasures to recruit experts. It didn't matter which sect they were from, even if they were from an evil sect or a demon cultivator from the outer sea, as long as they were willing to fight for the Zhongtai sect, they would be treated as an honored guest and granted their requests. Seeing this, Zhang Yan's eyes flashed. Zhang Boyan had found quite a few ghost sunflowers and hidden earth lotuses over the years, but he still hadn't found the Shijing. If the Zhongtai sect could bring it out, he wouldn't mind going to the Dragon Pillar Assembly. Chapter 648. There were still 16 years until the gathering of the dragon pillars. Zhang Yan thought that he did not need to be in a hurry. Because there was nothing to disturb him in recent years, he felt that his cultivation progress was quite fast. In another 7 to 8 years, he would be able to raise his cultivation to the next level. At that time, it would not be too late to go. After he finished discussing with Zhao Ge, he stepped out of the cave. He looked up and saw that it was already the first hour of the day. The sky was already dark. The mountain in the distance was hazy. He leaped up and returned to the cave on the peak of the mountain to circulate the Junyang essence. Very quickly, the night passed and he woke up from his meditation. It was dawn and the sun was about to rise. Remembering what Priest Wen said before he left yesterday, he told Jing Yu, who was accompanying him, "There's a boy in the lower house who has traveled thousands of miles to be apprenticed to me. Bring him up the mountain to see me." Jing Yu acknowledged and immediately left the cave. He boarded a flying boat and went down the mountain. The Hanyuan lower courtyard was located at the foot of Tsangju Peak, about 10 miles away from the main mountain gate. When Zhang Yan first gave the order to build the lower courtyard, there were only a few bamboo houses because there were very few disciples. As more and more disciples came to join the lower courtyard, the Hanyuan lower courtyard gradually expanded. But this place was originally in the wilderness and most of the disciples were descendants of the nobles of the Shunwu mountain, so it was quite uncomfortable for them to live here. Thus, they ordered the servants and craftsmen to build many pavilions and pavilions. At first, they were afraid of being punished by the sect and did not dare to go too far. But later, when they saw that the sect did not care about their actions, they became bold and moved all the luxurious things of their clan here. Later on, the disciples also followed suit. They diverted water to create a lake and planted flowers and trees everywhere. In the past 10 years, this place had become quite exquisite and beautiful. The jade stairs were like silver, the flowers wilting by the lotus pond, the strange stone corridors, everywhere was elegant. Willow streams and bamboo paths, platforms and square bridges, everything was prepared. Because of this, many disciples in the lower house would go out on a boat to tour the lake in their spare time, singing the wind and admiring the moon. When Zhang Yan heard about this, he told the people of the sect not to bother about it. Just let it be. The lower house was the first door to test the disciples' Tao heart. Whether or not they want to pursue immortality is their own business. If you are willing to learn, I will teach you. If you do not have the heart, give up the opportunity. I won't force it. At this moment, the morning sun was just beginning to shine. In the lower house, there were already a few disciples who were concentrating on cultivating their inner qi. At this moment, they saw a boy with an unusually large head coming over on a flying boat. He recognized that this was the attendant of the sect leader. One of them came up and bowed, saying, "Master Jing Shang, what can I do for you to come down the mountain today?" Jing Yu glanced over and said, "You are Qiu Guang?" The disciple didn't expect Jing Yu to remember his name and couldn't help but reveal a happy expression. "It is this disciple." Jing Yu seemed to ask casually, "Do you have a 10-year-old boy who is rumored to have come from outside the Shunwu mountain to be a disciple?" The disciple thought for a moment and said with a smile, "Master Jing Shang was originally here to look for Zhao Yang. Master Jing Shang, please wait a moment. This disciple will go and find him." Jing Yu waved his hand and said, "Go quickly and come back quickly." Qiu Guang didn't dare to delay. After bowing, he lifted his foot and left. He remembered that Zhao Yang seemed to live in a side courtyard in the northwest. Because he was still young and wasn't a citizen of the Shunwu mountain, no one invited him out to play. At this moment, he was probably still studying the eroding writings in the hut. After a while, he arrived in front of a secluded bamboo building and said loudly, "Is junior brother Zhao here?" If it was in the past, he didn't even need to greet a disciple who had just entered the sect and stepped inside. However, Jing Yu coming to look for this boy made him realize that this Zhao Yang might not be ordinary, so there was no need to offend him. After a while, a clear and slightly childish voice rang out in the courtyard, "Zhao Yang is here. Which senior brother is outside?" Qiu Guang said, "Junior brother Zhao, I am your senior brother Qiu. Do you still remember? Let's not talk about this. Let's not talk about this." I came here to tell you that Master Jingshang from Tsangju Peak has come to find you. At this moment he is waiting outside. Junior brother Zhao, your fortune has come. Inside the bamboo building, a delicate and pretty boy was sitting in front of a table. His skin was white, his eyes were clear, and his lips were tightly pursed. He was clearly only about 10 years old, but his body revealed a calm aura that only an adult could have. After hearing these words, his heart jumped and he thought to himself, the opportunity has finally come. He had come to this mountain for another purpose besides becoming a disciple. He took a deep breath and tried to calm down. He said, "Thank you, senior brother, for coming to tell me. I will come now." He stood up, tidied up his clothes, and steadily walked out of the bamboo building. Qiu Guang greeted him with a smile and affectionately held his hand. He said, "Today, I came to be apprenticed not only to seek Tao but also to seek the protection of the head. If I can serve you, I am willing to offer a large sex treasury." After saying this, he kowtowed heavily. Zhang Yan's expression did not change. He smiled faintly and said, "A large sex treasury? Zhao Yang, tell me honestly, where did you come from?" Zhao Yang lowered his head and said, "My father's surname is Zhao Huan. He is a disciple of the Fuyang sect. This time, I came under my father's orders to be apprenticed to you." Fuyang sect? Zhang Yan's eyes flashed slightly. It was not the first time he came to Dongsheng. He naturally knew that this sect was originally one of the 8 large sects in Dongsheng continent. It was also an evil sect. After thinking about it for a while, he asked a few more questions and finally understood that Zhao Yang's father, Zhao Huan, knew about a secret treasure that had been passed down from his sect and was interrogated by several of his fellow disciples. In the end, he was seriously injured and had to escape. Because his injuries were severe and there was no medicine to cure him, he could only dismember himself and seal his soul with a secret technique. Although Zhao Yang was his son, he was not yet at the age to cultivate Xianqi. He did not have any Dao skills. Moreover, he was just a child. Without guidance and without the tools to cultivate Dao, he might not even be able to open his meridians. If his fellow disciples from the same sect came looking for him, he would not be able to defend himself. To avoid this disaster, before he left, his father told him to come to Han Yuan's sect to be apprenticed to a master. If he was successful in his cultivation, he could escort Zhao Huan's soul to reincarnate as a human and retrieve the treasury at the same time. Zhang Yan asked curiously, "There are countless sects in the world. Why did your father tell you to come alone to Shenwu Mountain to be apprenticed to me?" Zhao Yang answered honestly, "Because sect leader Zhenren exchanged the 3 Xian weapons for spiritual herbs. After my father heard about it, he also came to Shenwu Mountain. He knew that sect leader came from another continent and once fought 1 against 5. Your cultivation is profound and cannot be compared to ordinary people. So he ordered me to come and be apprenticed to you." This was only the surface reason. Fuyang sect had made many enemies in the past and there were not many people they could trust. Zhang Yan was a cultivator from another continent and had no enmity with his sect. If his identity was exposed, he would not take his life. Zhao Yang kowtowed and said, "If sect leader Zhenren is willing to accept me as a disciple, I am willing to offer the treasury in exchange for a chance." He was very afraid that Zhao Huan's fellow disciples would find him. If he was just a normal disciple of Han Yuan sect, even if he was captured, the sect would not stand up for him. But if he became the sect leader's disciple, it would be different. With Zhang Yan's cultivation, he would be able to protect him. Although the treasury was good, he needed to be alive to enjoy it. Instead of holding it in his hands, it was better to exchange it for a chance. Zhang Yan pondered for a while and finally said, "You and I are not destined to be master and disciple, but I can choose a good master for you. You can leave first." When Zhao Yang heard that he couldn't become Zhang Yan's disciple, he couldn't help but feel a little disappointed. But then he thought about it again. Since it was the sect leader's recommendation, it shouldn't be too bad. He calmed down a little, kowtowed, and then left. 10 days later, Zhang Boyan, who had gone out to search for medicinal ingredients, returned to the sect. He did not need to report and went straight to the cave to see Zhang Yan. After greeting and sitting down, he took out a wooden box and placed it on the table. He said, "When I went out this time, I met the 6th Prince of Chu again. I heard that the manor head is looking for the 3 spiritual herbs, so he ordered me to deliver this." Zhang Yan took the wooden box and looked at it. He raised his eyebrows and said, "Snake ring crystal?" This box of snake ring crystal could be used to refine a white yuan that could be used for 3 years. Although it was a drop in the bucket for cultivation, the meaning behind it was self-evident. This meant that he had something that he wanted. He smiled as if he did not care. He put the wooden box aside and turned to Zhang Boyan. He said, "Zhang, you have been cultivating for hundreds of years, but until now, you have not found a disciple to pass on your skills to. This is not appropriate. I have a disciple under my sect. His talent is excellent and his heart is firm. It depends on whether you are willing to accept him or not." Chapter 649. When Zhang Boyan was at the Netherworld Spring sect, he did not take in half a disciple. After becoming a foreign official under Zhang Yan, he thought that if he reincarnated in the future, at worst he could rely on the protection of Zhao Nether Mansion. It might not be a bad way out, so he never thought about it again. Now that he heard that Zhang Yan had taken the initiative to find a disciple for him, and that his words were quite extraordinary, he was surprised at first. Then he was a little moved. He replied, "If the manor head chooses a disciple for me, then he must be a good one." Zhang Yan smiled and said, "Good or bad, it's up to me. We cultivators also pay attention to the fate of master and disciple. This matter still needs Zhang to decide." He said to Jing Yu, "Go bring Zhao Yang here." Jing Yu responded and quickly left the cave, riding the wine down the mountain. He came and went very quickly. Zhang Boyan had only talked a little about his experiences outside when he had already returned and brought Zhao Yang in. After entering the cave, Zhao Yang hurriedly knelt down to pay his respects. When Zhang Boyan saw this, his eyes shone with a strange light. He stood up and walked forward, reaching out to touch the back of Zhao Yang's neck, not opening his mouth to speak. His appearance was extremely ferocious. His hands were rough and hard like an old tree. When he gripped the joints, there was a cracking sound. It was rare that Zhao Yang was not afraid at all. His calm appearance did not seem like a 10-year-old boy at all. Zhang Boyan took 2 steps back, a green light flashing in his eyes. He snickered and said, "This talent is not something a normal person can obtain. Xiantian is already rare and valuable, and he has been soaked in good spirit liquid since he was young. All his meridians are unobstructed. This child's elders must be among my cultivators." Zhang Yan nodded and said with a smile, "Zhang has a good eye. This child's surname is Zhao Yang. His father was originally a cultivator of this continent's Fuyang sect." Zhang Boyan had roamed the East Victory continent for more than 10 years and had naturally heard of the Fuyang sect's name. His thoughts changed and he asked, "Manor Head, do you have anything to say?" Zhang Yan smiled and said, "I don't need to explain the reason behind it. Fellow Taoist can ask Zhao Yang later and you'll know." Zhao Yang was very intelligent. Seeing this, he had more or less guessed that Zhang Boyan was the master that the sect leader had found for him. He knelt down and said, "Disciple greets master." Zhang Boyan laughed. He saw that Zhao Yang was very quick-witted and was very satisfied. Zhao Yang was still unable to cultivate inner qi due to his age. There was nothing strange about it. However, once they embarked on the path of cultivation, he cupped his hands and said, "Many thanks, Manor Head. I want this disciple." Zhang Yan said to Jing Yu, "I still have something to say to Zhang. Take Zhao Yang down and find a cave for him to stay in." Jing Yu stepped forward and patted Zhao Yang's shoulder, saying, "Junior apprentice brother Zhao, come with me." Zhao Yang bowed to the 2 people in the cave again, then stood up and followed them out. Outside the cave, he lowered his head and cupped his hands, saying, "Senior apprentice brother Jing, I have just entered the sect and don't know many rules. In the future, I will need senior apprentice brother's guidance." Jing Yu thought that this junior apprentice brother was very sensible. He shouldn't look down on him because of his young age, so he might as well do him a favor, saying, "In the future, you are not an outsider, so you don't need to be so formal." Although Jinren is a guest of Master, Master has always treated him with respect. If you follow Jinren, you will also have to return to the sect in the future. You have to grasp this opportunity. Zhao Yang carefully asked, "Senior apprentice brother, are we going to leave this place?" Jing Yu smiled mysteriously, saying, "You will know when the time comes." Inside the cave, Zhang Yan said, Zhang, it's good that you are back. In a few days, I will go to the eastern boundary of the House of God and open up a heavenly furnace of earth fire for the sect to forge weapons. It will take a few months to go back and forth. When I am not here, you will be in charge of the sect for me." Zhang Boyan immediately agreed. After sitting for another half an hour, he said goodbye and left. Zhang Yan then called Zhao Ge over and told him many things. When there was nothing else to arrange, he left the cave, riding the strong wind, and headed east. This time, because the heavenly furnace of earth fire was not in the sect, he needed to find a safe and secluded place. Fortunately, Zhang Boyan had been here before and remembered the terrain. So this time, he only needed to follow the map. Zhang Yan did not use his sword ray, but rode the wind in the clouds. After 3 days, the terrain in front of him bulged and a high ground appeared. It was shaped like a square table, facing a high cliff in the southwest. The two were separated by a ravine. Below the ravine was luxuriant grass, and everything was grayish-yellow. A few miles to his right, there was another scenery. A gurgling mountain spring seeped out from the cliff, and mist filled the air. Even from far away, he could feel the coolness. On the hill, there was a banyan tree that was 1,000 feet tall. Its crown was unusually large, and its branches were luxuriant. The old vines at its base were full of fallen leaves. The east of the house was mostly barren land, but this place was very unique. As he was flying, a grayish-white circle of light suddenly flew out from under the banyan tree. A female cultivator came out from inside. Her face was like a hibiscus, her skin was white, and her body was curvy. She wore a peach-colored long dress, and a light muslin draped over her shoulders. She held a bamboo basket in her hand, which was covered with a red cloth. The woman seemed to have come out coincidentally, and when she saw Zhang Yan's light, her expression tensed. She did not say anything, but looked at him with a bit of vigilance. Zhang Yan suddenly remembered that Zhang Boyan seemed to have met the disciple of the heretical sect here. In order to avoid the pursuit of the 5 great sects, he was living in seclusion here. Looking at the woman's appearance, he felt that she was similar to the description, so he greeted her and asked, "Is it Lady Che in front?" The woman took a few steps back and frowned. "Who are you? I haven't seen any guests for a long time, so where did you hear my name?" Zhang Yan smiled and said, "I'm the person in charge of the West Godly House Immortal City. I happened to pass by here, and I heard Zhang mention Lady Che before, so I know you." When Lady Che heard him introduce himself, she seemed to be relieved. She put her hand on her chest and said, "You scared me. I thought it was some enemy who came looking for me." "So it's Sect Master Zhang. I heard Zhang Boyan mention you before. Your sect Master Han Yuan is really interesting. Why don't you stay in the Immortal City and come to this barren mountain instead?" When Zhang Yan saw that she was in a hurry, he smiled and asked, "May I know where you are going in such a hurry, fellow Che?" Lady Che was obviously in a good mood, so she didn't hide anything and said, "A few days ago, I received a letter from my sister saying that the sect master of Zhongtai sect is recruiting cultivators from all over the world. Even those from the heretical sects are welcome. Since I have some cultivation, I want to give it a try. It's better than staying in this damned place and not seeing a single person." Zhang Yan cupped his fist and smiled. "Then I wish you a pleasant journey, fellow Taoist." Lady Che also smiled and said, "I'm in a hurry to meet my sister. Fellow Taoist Zhang, I'll take my leave now. We'll meet again if fate allows it." When she finished, she bowed and turned into a ray of rainbow light, flying into the sky. Zhang Yan took a few glances at her and pondered for a moment. Then, with a wave of his sleeve, he stirred up a gust of wind and disappeared into the distance. Tens of thousands of miles to the north of the Divine House Mountain, there was an island that occupied an area of 10,000 hectares. This place used to be the palace of the celestial Civ sect, but it was later occupied by the demonic Python tribe from Donghua and became their abode. The scenery of this island was extremely unusual. The island was surrounded by dikes, and fine white sand was spread out in a gentle slope, encircling a lake. The lake was clear and crystalline, and at this moment, there were thousands of giant pythons rolling and playing in the water. When the sun shone on their brightly colored scales, it would occasionally emit light. If there were mystic cultivators watching from 100 miles away, they would see a towering demonic aura rising into the sky like smoke, condensing and not dispersing, covering the entire ocean. On one side of the lake, there were 2 cultivators standing. The one in the lead was around 40 years old, with phoenix eyes, a jade-like face and a long beard. He wore a black cloak with silver threads, a pair of cloud-climbing shoes, a wind-repelling immortal crown, and a string of beads hanging down from his temples. In his hand he held a 3-foot-long jade scepter. This person was the tribe leader of the Python tribe, Luo Jiangyu. After losing the Battle of the 3 Pools, the Python tribe moved to this Beima ocean world, and the old demon, Luo Mengzi, was cultivating in seclusion and didn't care about the outside world, so he took over the position of tribe leader. At this moment he was staring at the lake beneath his feet. After a while, he nodded and said, "This time, there are a total of 32 tribe members who can transform, and 7 of them can choose to cultivate the mystic technique of the Qi path. This is more than half of the previous time." The person standing beside him was called Luo Dongchuan, and he was his tribe brother. This person was tall and sturdy, with a thick beard and a wide face. His eyes were full of spirit, and he was full of spirit. However, even though he had also cultivated the Yuanying technique, his cultivation was far from Luo Jiangyu's. At this moment, he added, "Fortunately, the Celestial Civ sect has accumulated a lot of resources. They filled this lake with spiritual herbs and nourished it for 100 years. The children can use this to refine their bodies day and night, and save tens of years of cultivation. For a demonic cultivator to transform, even if they were talented, they would usually need more than 100 years of cultivation before they could cultivate the mystic technique." Previously in the Donghua continent, the disciples of the Python tribe, other than the main bloodline, had to rely on hard work. Until they came here because they occupied the Celestial Civ sect, even the savings of thousands of years were all given to them. That was why they took out such a large sum of money to refine the whole lake into a medicinal pool for all the disciples to cultivate. Luo Jiangyu looked for a while, then suddenly turned his head and asked, "I have been in seclusion for more than 10 years. Have you found out the origin of the person who killed the 2 brothers?" Luo Dongchuan was taken aback. He was caught off guard and stammered, "Other than that person's surname is Zhang, and he came from another continent, I don't know anything else." Luo Jiangyu frowned and said, "Before I went into seclusion, I ordered you to investigate. After so many years, have you still not found anything?" Luo Dongchuan said in a low voice, "Big brother, after this person came to the Divine House Mountain, he did not come out. Even the disciples rarely saw him. It is doubly difficult for us to investigate." In fact, what he said was just an excuse. The Yu brothers were demonic cultivators that were subdued after they came to the Northern Sea domain. Not only were they not very smart, they usually relied on their copper skin and iron bones and were very arrogant. If it were not for the fact that the 2 brothers were Yuanying cultivators, he would have killed them long ago. This time, their deaths were exactly what he wanted, so why would he bother to find out who killed them? But now that Chu Changji was missing, he felt that it was a pity that this lead was broken. Seeing his expression, Luo Jiangyu snorted and did not continue to ask. He said, "Now that the Zhongtai faction has opened their mountain gate, the people of the Python tribe can openly go to the Dongsheng continent. This matter is especially important. You should pay attention to it. For the time being, don't worry about the Divine House Mountain." Chapter 650. If one was a Grotto Heaven Realm cultivator, he would only need to use his mana to activate the earth fire and create a heavenly furnace. Other than the fact that it would take a long time, there was nothing special about it. However, if one did not have the ability of a Grotto Heaven Realm cultivator, It was not impossible. For example, Zhang Yan's Dragon Country sea boat was originally made by the Yin family of East Ocean. It was also made with the earth fire heavenly furnace. The ancestors of the Yin family found a natural cave and used a clever technique to bring up the earth fire. This was using the geographical power to make it his own. Although there were still many unsatisfactory aspects, with this furnace in hand, many sects were envious. This technique was not secret, the key was to find the right place. In the Donghua continent, all such places were occupied by sects of all sizes. The eastern boundary of the East God House stretched for tens of thousands of miles. It was vast and sparsely populated, but there was no need to worry about people obstructing it. Zhang Yan walked around the mountain for more than half a month. He explored dozens of caves in the river, but none of them were satisfactory. On this day, he came to a cave. Coincidentally, this was the location of the desolate tomb where Zhang Boyan had caught the ghost sunflower. Zhang Yan stepped on the cloud and looked up for a while. He pointed and a few formation flags floated down. He was used to being cautious. Although there were no living people here, he still set up a protection restriction within a radius of more than 10 miles. After everything was ready, he took out a set of flags that he had refined in advance. He spread out his hands and inserted them into the mountain ridge. He then activated the incantation. There was a puffing sound and immediately, dozens of green smoke spurted out from the flags. He made a gesture and used his spiritual opportunity. After a while, the smoke condensed into 100 cranes with bright feathers. The cranes cried out. As soon as they came out, they spread their wings and flew into the cave. Then, they floated away and landed on a nearby mountain. They sat cross-legged and waited there patiently. Previously, after Zhang Boyan captured Ghost Kuei, he also ordered the devil to go down and take a look. After walking for several hours, he still hadn't reached the end. He didn't know how deep it was, but if he went any deeper, the demon would lose his senses. He didn't see any strange flowers or plants. Therefore, he was not in the mood to investigate further. He withdrew his Dao technique and retreated. After the smoke crane left, there was no news of it for 3 days and nights. However, this object was inscribed with a talisman seal, and then used the banner to materialize. Although it didn't have any magical abilities, it could still rely on the magic power attached to the banner. However, it was enough for him to fly for half a month, which was why Zhang Yan was not anxious. After another day, he suddenly heard a strange noise and opened his eyes to look to his left. One of the banners ignited without any fire and turned into a pile of ashes in an instant. His expression changed. He pinched his fingers and calculated. A moment later, he smiled and said, "This saves me a lot of trouble." Just now, the smoke crane was actually being burned by the fire chi. That was why the banner was instantly burned. This meant that this cave could reach deep into the earth. This was a good thing for him, as it would make it much easier for him to draw out the earth fire. He stood up and turned into a ray of sword light, shooting down into the cave like lightning. Previously, he had already tried to find out that there was nothing wrong with the cave, so he flew very quickly. In less than 2 hours, he felt as if he had entered a furnace. The walls were red, sparks flew everywhere, and dust filled the air. There was a protective glow around his body. His skin felt hot, and his hair felt like it was about to burn. He knew that he was just now, where the smoke crane touched the earth fire. Not only was the fire chi fierce, but it was also accompanied by the fire chi of the earth lung. If a cultivator with a lower cultivation level was burned by this chi, their skin and flesh would be instantly burned. If they breathed in a little, their internal organs would be burned. With Zhang Yan's current cultivation level, he wasn't afraid of it. However, if he wanted to craft weapons, he wouldn't be able to do so. Therefore, he needed to use a few methods to suppress it. He waved his sleeve, and a huge piece of wood that was 100 feet long flew out. This piece of wood was called Qingming wood, a precious material that was as famous as the dark vermilion wood. Just a broken piece of wood could burn for hundreds of years without extinguishing. It could also get rid of evil and retain good. This time, he wanted to use it to draw out the earth fire and eliminate the fire chi. He took out an apricot yellow talisman paper and forced a drop of blood from the tip of his finger. He drew an incantation on the talisman and patted it on the wooden stake. With a light push, the wooden stake was sent deep into the cave. Then, he stood at the same spot and focused his senses. After a while, he realized that the talisman had turned into ashes and flew away. He knew that he had reached the end of the cave. He used his mana from afar, and with a rumble, the Qingming wood was inserted into the wall of the cave. At this time, he let out a shout and threw out a dozen pieces of wood in one breath. He then flew up. Every time he went up, he would use his mana and hit the wood into the wall of the cave. After the Qingming wood absorbed the fire qi, it would give birth to an open fire. This smoke would rise up, and after about a year, the wood at the top could also be ignited. Going up like this was like climbing stairs. If it was short, it would take 10 years. If it was long, it would take 100 years. At that time, not only would the fire qi be eliminated, the fire would be much stronger than before. Then he could use it without worry. However, there was a problem with setting up this piece of wood. There were many apertures in the cave. Not to mention that they were densely packed, there were also many twists and turns. It wasn't straight up or down. This required him to use his mana to forcefully open up a path. Fortunately, he had the 5 elements escape technique. Moving rocks and soil was not a problem. Whenever he saw an obstruction, he would send an earth element true light over and divert it to another place. Back then, when the Yin clan's elder ancestor opened up the earth furnace, he had invited several people of the same path to help him. It took him half a year. Just now, it was a great success. It was far from as easy as he was today. However, after refining this furnace, the benefits were great. Not only could it refine ocean boats and cloud carriages, it could also refine flying mountains. If one was good at it, with enough precious materials, he could even use it to refine profound weapons. After the Yin clan had the earth fire heavenly furnace, the clan was prosperous and had not declined until now. Precisely because he knew the various benefits, Zhang Yan spent a lot of effort to build one for the Cold Abyss Gate. With the amount of Qingming wood that was thrown here, it would not be a problem to use 300 to 400 years. Even if he left this place, there would be a next sect leader who would take over this place. There was no need to worry that it would be abandoned. Not long after Zhang Yan descended, 2 streaks of light suddenly appeared on the surface of the ground. They were pale white and looked extremely evil. Before they passed through the crypt, they were obstructed by the forbidden formation, causing their bodies to pause for a moment. Subsequently, they landed on the mountain top one after another. The person in the lead was a skinny old man. He had a sinister expression and shriveled cheeks. He was dressed in black and had a hissing live snake coiled around his waist. The other person was 17 or 18 years old. He was dressed like a scholar. His face was pale and his eyes were red. He had short legs and a fat body. His clothes were full of copper coins with square holes and were strung with golden threads. He gave off an evil aura from head to toe. The old man looked at the cave below and said with narrowed eyes, "That's strange. The Divine House Mountain has always been desolate and uninhabited. I didn't think that there would be someone laying down a restrictive formation here." The scholar also looked around and said, "What can he do? It has nothing to do with us. We can just go around it." The old man smiled coldly and said, "How can it be so easy? He blocked the path of us brothers. Are we just going to let him go like this? Let's see who it is first. If he's easy to deal with, we'll take him down and refine him into a mysterious corpse protector." The scholar did not agree. He frowned and said, "This restrictive formation is not simple. It must be the work of an expert. Looking at the mana and spiritual vigor, his cultivation is not below us. He won't be easy to deal with." The old man rolled up his sleeves and snorted. He said, "It's good that his cultivation is high. Otherwise, I won't be interested." The scholar advised, "Senior brother, we are rushing to get the book that Master left behind. Why do we have to create unnecessary trouble and make enemies out of nothing?" The old man glared at him and said unhappily, "My corpse formation is still missing one. I heard you say that Bichche lives here. Who knew that after searching for more than 10 days, I didn't see anyone. Now that I see one, you're still stopping me. Are you going to give it to me?" That's fine too. Bring me the lifeless coffin that master left behind and I'll let it go. As soon as he said that, the scholar choked. He knew that he couldn't persuade the old man anymore. He said helplessly, "This restrictive formation has been here for many days. If this person doesn't show up, are you going to wait here forever?" The old man sneered. "The East God House is a barren and barren land, yet someone actually came here. I don't believe that there's nothing wrong with the underground cave. It's fine to wait for a few more days, but do you think they're going to stay there for a year or so? Don't worry. If there's a lot of people, I'll turn around and leave. If there's only 1 or 2 people, the scholar said, "Then we'll do as senior brother says. I'll accompany you." The old man was satisfied and said, "Junior brother, there's still 16 years until the gathering of the dragon pillars. After we retrieve the book, we'll have enough time to cultivate. Don't be anxious. We've waited for so many years. Are you afraid of waiting a little longer?" The scholar nodded and said, "This time, the opening of the Zhongtai sect is a great opportunity for our sect. As long as we master the mysterious technique, we can go to the old sect to retrieve the heavenly corpse token left behind by master. Then we can call back our fellow sect members who are scattered all over the 9 states. It's not an extravagant hope to rebuild our sect." After Zhang Yan entered the cave, on the 8th day, he had almost set up the heavenly cauldron. He looked up and down again. After confirming that there were no mistakes, he calculated the time and flew up into the sky. He used the conveyance light and went to the surface. The old man and the scholar had been waiting in the secret place for a few days, yet they didn't see any movement from below, and they were slightly unable to restrain themselves. At this moment, they suddenly saw a streak of light flashing out from the underground cave, and they couldn't help but feel excited, but when they looked carefully, their expressions changed. The old man lowered his voice and said, "Junior brother, did you see it?" The scholar swallowed and said, "It seems to be the sword escape technique. Could it be a disciple of the Fengxiang sword school?" Chapter 651. When Zhang Yan reached the surface, he was about to remove the prohibition. However, just as he was about to move, he felt a sword hum coming from between his brows. His eyes flashed. It was a warning from the sword pill. It must be someone with enmity hiding at the side. His thoughts changed, but he didn't seem to notice it on his face. His expression was normal as he arrived in the sky. First, he made a few hand signs, and then he waved his hand, retrieving the banners that were placed on the various mountaintops. The black-robed old man was watching carefully. He saw that Zhang Yan was also a Yuaning cultivator. There were 3 clouds above his head, 2 real and 1 fake. He was just 1 step away from entering the 2nd stage of Yuaning. He was slightly hesitant. Just now, he insisted on making a move because the corpse formation was lacking a main refined corpse. However, the corpse must not be damaged or its power would be greatly reduced. However, Zhang Yan was a level higher than him. If they were to fight later, he would not be able to suppress Zhang Yan if he were to be too gentle. If he were to be too heavy, he might be injured and it would be all for naught. However, he thought about it again. Zhang Yan looked like he was alone while he had fellow disciples who knew each other well. As long as the timing was right, there was still a chance of success. At this moment, he suddenly felt that the spiritual vigor around him was fading away. He took in another breath of vigor and judged that the restrictive formation had been removed. He knew that his chance had come. He secretly gave the scholar beside him a look and then leaped up into the air. Although he had appeared, he did not make a move. Instead, he bowed from afar and greeted, "Fellow Taoist, please." The reason why he did this was because he wanted to attract Zhang Yan's attention. Then, his junior brother could take the opportunity to lay out the corpse formation and surround all directions. At that time, Zhang Yan would want to use his flying sword to escape. However, it would not be so easy. Zhang Yan smiled and returned the greeting, "Fellow Taoist, why did you call I?" The old man laughed dryly and said, "I am Duan Xiangzhou, an overseas independent cultivator. Just now, I was stopped by fellow Taoists' restriction when I was passing through this place. Because this is a barren mountain with few people around, I was curious. Therefore, I want to see which fellow Taoist is hiding here." Although he was talking, he secretly hid a hand behind his back and made a gesture. But after waiting for a while, there was still no movement. He was puzzled, but at the same time he was somewhat angry. He thought to himself, why hasn't Shitty made his move? Could it be that he changed his mind again? However, he did not know that when the scholar saw that he had ascended to the sky, he was about to use his sex secret technique. However, at that moment, the spiritual vigor around him solidified. Just now, the restrictive formation that had clearly retreated actually surged up again. Not only was it blocking in front of him, the area it occupied was even wider than before, causing him to be forced to retreat in a sorry state. It took him a while to stabilize himself. This sudden turn of events caught the scholar off guard. When he was far away, he looked in again. There was a fog in front of him, and he could not see anything clearly. It was clear that someone had used magic to isolate the inside from the outside. His heart could not help but thump. Just now, Zhang Yan had actually only recalled the flag and not removed the restrictive formation. He had only opened a door where the two of them were. Duan Xiangzhou did not know that his plan had already been discovered, so he rushed in. When the scholar thought of his senior brother being alone inside, he became anxious as well. His expression continuously changed several times. Finally, he clenched his teeth and took out a small pitch-black coffin from his sleeve. He held it in his palm and muttered an incantation. After a short while, the coffin was lifted up by a mass of grayish-black cloud and rose high into the sky. In a flash, it became 30 feet in size. This object was once a treasure of the corpse cult, and was originally a killing weapon. If it was illuminated by the light from the coffin, it would immediately become dazed and muddle-headed. If there was no method to restrain it, after a dozen breaths, its soul would be absorbed, and it would become a walking corpse. In particular, the coffin also contained the 5-ene poisoned phosphorus fire. This fire was refined by the founder of the corpse cult from the chi aperture of a 10,000-year-old heavenly corpse. Any treasure light or restriction that came into contact with it would gradually wear away its spiritual chi. However, because of its reputation, when the Zhongtai sect and Fengxiang sword school broke into the corpse cult's mountain gate, they had invited their sect's treasures to besiege and destroy the treasure's true spirit. Although it later fell into the hands of Duan Xiangzhou, its power was only a 10th or 20% of its original power. Even so, it was still much stronger than ordinary Shen weapons, so it was easy to break this restrictive formation. The scholar took out the incantation and shouted loudly as he moved the lid of the coffin. A muffled sound resounded out as a cloud of dust that seemed like accumulated dust flew out from within. Only when one looked carefully would one be able to see that it was actually a cluster of flames that were the size of a grain of rice. As far as the eye could see, they were completely lusterless, cold white, gray, and lifeless. Even if he was the person who cast the spell, just a slight contact of his gaze caused him to feel his chest tighten and short of breath, and he felt irritated and nauseous. He hurriedly closed his eyes and didn't dare to look again. His hand pointed forward, and he controlled the 5-ene phosphorus fire to sway towards the formation. As the person in charge of the restrictive formation, Zhang Yan could naturally see what was going on outside. When the coffin came out, he immediately sensed that something was wrong. He glanced at the coffin and suddenly saw the fire, feeling slightly dizzy. At this moment, a sword light flashed in between his eyebrows, and the evil chi that had invaded him was destroyed. His eyes regained their clarity. He was slightly surprised and said, "This chi is really unique. It can even confuse one's mind through the restrictive formation. I'll have to take a look at it later." Duan Xiangzhou didn't see the scholar make a move for a long time, so he also felt that something was wrong. He couldn't help but lean half his body to the side and secretly look behind him. He saw that the scenery several li away was blurry, as if there was a thin layer of gauze covering it. His expression unconsciously changed. Only now did he know that his trick had been seen through. His eyes flickered, and he suddenly shook his hand slightly, making an extremely covert movement. In a split second, a thin and long nail flew towards Zhang Yan. The nail was a foot long, and its head was in the shape of a skull. Green flames spewed out from its eye sockets, and the body of the nail was entangled with vengeful spirits. As it flew, it emitted an evil chi. This nail was called Slaughter Cry, and he had made it by imitating a treasure of his sect. If a cultivator's protective treasure light was hit, it would stick to it, and it wouldn't be able to be removed in a hurry. As long as the other party slightly relaxed, it would immediately pierce through and kill. This nail was very sinister and vicious, and it was impossible to guard against. Even if one's cultivation was higher than his opponent, if they didn't know the ins and outs of it, they would easily fall into its trap. When Zhang Yan saw this, he smiled. He didn't seem to do anything, but suddenly, a brilliant light soared in front of him, and it seemed to suddenly set off a vast and mighty tide. When the nail was thrown into it, it was like a stone thrown into the sea, and disappeared without a sound. Duan Xiangzhou couldn't help but suck in a breath of cold air. Ever since his sect was broken and he escaped, he had fought with many cultivators, and he had seen many powerful people. However, he had never seen someone like Zhang Yan who could easily take away this slaughter cry nail. Just from this, he knew that the opponent in front of him was not someone to be trifled with. Let alone capturing him to refine his corpse, he might die here if he wasn't careful. Thinking of this, his heart was full of regret, but at this moment, it was impossible to get off. Since he had already attacked, he didn't believe that his opponent would let him go, so he could only fight to the death. His figure retreated explosively, distancing himself from Zhang Yan. At the same time, the two gang yun above his head shook, and a dozen or so fiendish smoke rose into the sky. They rose to a height of 1,000 feet and rotated. In an instant, they condensed into a whistling gale, which swept back and forth. Within it, there were hundreds and thousands of white bone blades moving with the wind, sometimes spreading out, sometimes gathering together. Although there were many of them, they didn't touch each other at all. From afar, it looked like a strange gray cocoon was breathing in and out. This was the white bone destruction astral wind that he cultivated, one of the corpse cult's guardian magical abilities. It could be used for both offense and defense, and when cultivated to the great accomplishment stage, one only needed to control this astral wind to immediately grind away the opponent's flesh and blood, turning them into a pile of bones. However, at this moment he only used it to protect his body. He was also clear that two people working together would have a greater chance of success than one person fighting alone. His junior brother had the lifeless treasure coffin in hand, so it would be easy for him to break the prohibition. It wouldn't be too late to wait for him to enter and then attack together. When Zhang Yan saw him using such a Taoist technique, his eyes narrowed, and he thought to himself, looking at the way these two people walk, I'm afraid they're cultivators of this continent's evil sect. I heard that they only act according to their own preferences and never care about anything else, which is somewhat similar to the devil's doctrine. Since I've cultivated this magical ability, I haven't used it in a fight, so I might as well use these two people to test it out. As this thought crossed his mind, his expression turned solemn, and a bit of dignity appeared on his face. At this moment, the 3 strong clouds above his head shook and turned into a purple gas that shot up to the sky. The sound of muffled thunder came from the sky. At first, it was intermittent and almost inaudible, but then it became a series of roars that shook the mountains and rivers, and then it turned into a loud sound that shook the entire sky. Outside, the scholar was controlling the fire to break the prohibition. Originally, he would have been able to burn through the prohibition, but when he suddenly heard this sound, it was as if someone had taken a hammer and fiercely hit his heart. His face immediately turned deathly pale, and he couldn't help but spit out a mouthful of blood. The cluster of 5-in phosphorus fire was no longer under his control, swayed a few times, and suddenly drilled into the ground, disappearing without a trace. Duan Xiangzhou didn't know what was going on, but when he heard the sound he felt his breath stop and his vision blur. When he looked up to the sky, he saw that the sky was filled with purple gas, covering a radius of 100 miles. He couldn't help but be shocked. How could he not see that the opponent was using a powerful divine ability, and that this kind of power couldn't be easily blocked? He originally wanted to attack Zhang Yan, but as the sound of thunder came closer, his chest felt like it was pressed down by a 10,000 gene boulder, and his limbs became stiff, making it difficult for him to stabilize his body. He knew that there was no chance, so he gave up on the idea. With a thought, a white lantern flew out from the strong clouds and floated above him. He raised his hand with great difficulty, and his trembling hand formed a seal. Instantly, a gloomy wind blew, and 12 figures instantly appeared in his surroundings. They seemed to be faintly discernible and drifted indeterminately. This was the Shadowless Corpse Lord, and it was one of the Shadowless Corpse Lords in the sect's secret record, the Myriad Corpse Diagram. Not only were they capable of resisting weapons, water, and fire, they were even capable of devouring lightning, and they were often utilized to resist lightning magic treasures and Dao arts. At this moment, Zhang Yan had already brewed the seal to the limit, and he suddenly shouted out loudly before pointing down. Instantly, it seemed as if the heavens and the earth were turning upside down and the mountains were collapsing. Suddenly, a myriad of bolts of lightning gave rise to a brilliant radiance that rumbled as they struck down from the sky. Chapter 652. As soon as the purple heaven thunder net was activated, lightning flashed within 100 miles. The scholar who was standing outside the restrictive formation was also enveloped within. He sensed that this was a life and death situation, so he forcefully activated his Xian Qi to suppress his surging blood. Then, he hurriedly cast a spell to summon the lifeless coffin before the lightning struck. The sound of a hammer hitting a piece of wood could be heard from above. Lightning flashed, and the roar shook his body. Blood flowed from the corner of his mouth. But this treasure was also miraculous. During this period of time, who knew how many lightning strikes it had suffered, but it was not damaged at all. But the strange thing was that the purple snakes of light that were bounced away did not dissipate. Instead, they drifted outside and gradually gathered together. Looking closely, it seemed to form a net. The purple heaven thunder net was divided into internal and external. The external net trapped heaven and earth, preventing the enemy from escaping. If the attack could not kill the enemy, it would form its own internal net, entangling the enemy from top to bottom. When it had accumulated enough, it would unleash its power again. Wave after wave, continuous, each stronger than the last. In the end, the infinite power of lightning would accumulate in one place. Once released, it would be as unstoppable as the sky and the earth. With Zhang Yan's current mana, if he attacked with all his might, he could activate the internal net to strike 36 times in a row. Even if the opponent had a magical weapon in hand, even if he was not blasted into powder, he would be killed by the thunder. Although the scholar relied on the treasure coffin to protect himself, activating the treasure consumed a lot of energy. Now that he was resisting this supernatural power that was like a heavenly tribulation, the mana in his body seemed to be flying away. After holding on for about 10 breaths, he felt exhausted and his vision darkened. He could only take out a few pills to stimulate his blood essence and swallow them. But this was like drinking poison to quench thirst. He could not hold on for long. In the restrictive formation, when the lightning struck, Duan Xiangzhou's white flame lantern was the first to bear the brunt and turned into ashes in an instant. Seeing that this magic treasure could not even stop it for a moment. How could he not know that the lightning in the sky was more powerful than he had imagined? In a moment of desperation, he shouted, and all the mana in his body surged out without reservation. His body was full of protective light. At the same time, the 12 Shadowless Corpse Lords behind him rushed forward. A deafening roar rang out as thick bolts of lightning broke through the green barrier and rained down like a torrential downpour. At first, the refined corpse was able to resist a little. However, after enduring a few dozen blows, his figure gradually dimmed. Not long after, he faintly showed signs of collapsing, as if he would dissipate with a gust of wind. Duan Xiangzhou had a bad feeling. Hurriedly, he spat out several mouthfuls of quintessential qi, and with this help, the 12 refined corpses swelled up like balloons. The gray fog around their bodies burned brightly, and for a time, the lightning was blocked outside. However, this was only a brief moment of respite. It wasn't that he couldn't see the power of this lightning technique. In the end, he wouldn't be able to withstand it. He had to find a way to escape as soon as possible. After hesitating for a moment, he summoned a layer of mist to cover his entire body. Then he took out a straw doll from his sleeve. It had hands and feet, and its edges were neatly trimmed without the slightest bit of burr. A crying face was drawn on the front. On the other side, there was a smiling face. Looking at this object, he felt apprehensive. This magic treasure was his final trump card. However, ever since he had obtained it from his master, he still hadn't been able to fully control it. Now that he had thrown it out, he really didn't know what would happen. However, if he didn't go all out, he would probably die here in the next moment. He had no other choice. Taking a deep breath, he steeled his heart, bit the tip of his tongue, and spat out a mouthful of blood essence. As soon as the blood essence touched the straw doll, it was immediately dyed red. However, after a few breaths, it was completely absorbed. Then, with a tremble, it jumped out of Duan Xiangzhou's hand as if it had come to life. It spun in a circle and grew to a height of 7 feet. In midair, a sound that seemed to be crying and laughing could be heard. Then, it turned its head and stared at him. Duan Xiangzhou's expression suddenly became unsightly. It was obvious that this thing felt that just now, he didn't have enough blood essence and still wanted to take it from him. In such a critical situation, he couldn't resist this action of taking advantage of the situation. With a muffled groan, he cut his wrist with the tip of his finger, causing a large amount of blood to spill out. The straw doll stepped forward and received all of the blood essence. Then, it suddenly revealed a strange expression to Duan Xiangzhou and let out a strange laugh. Unexpectedly, it turned around and left. It drilled into a nearby crack in the rock and disappeared without a trace. Duan Xiangzhou was stunned at first, then he let out a roar. The bun on his head suddenly scattered and his eyes became incomparably red. He had originally hoped to rely on the straw doll to escape, but he didn't expect it to abandon him. It was clear that the heavens wanted him dead. He could only desperately squeeze out the magic power in his body, hoping that his junior brother would be able to rush in and save him. But at this moment, the scholar was also in a difficult situation, so how could he have the time to worry about him? After 100 breaths, the 12 shadowless corpse monarchs let out mournful wails and were beaten back to their original forms. One by one, they were scattered by the lightning. Then, a dazzling purple light completely surrounded him, and with another loud sound, he was beaten until not even his bones were left. After he annihilated this person, Zhang Yan had the leisure to pay attention to this place. He turned around and saw that the scholar was still resisting. However, based on the current situation, it wouldn't be long before he suffered the same fate as Duan Xiangzhou. At this time, a thought flashed through his mind, and he made a hand seal with his fingers, stopping the divine ability. The scholar saw that the lightning in the sky had suddenly disappeared, and his mind relaxed. He felt that all the strength in his body had dissipated, and he could no longer stand, collapsing to the ground. Without a person controlling it, the lifeless coffin shook a little, then shrunk to the size of a foot, and fell to the ground with a clatter. Zhang Yan walked out of the restrictive formation and came in front of the person, slowly descending. He first glanced at the small black coffin, and saw that there was not a single mark on it after being struck by so many lightning bolts. He knew that it was a rare treasure, so he rolled up his sleeve and used a strong wind to roll it up. He didn't hold it in his hand, but instead hovered in the air and injected a strand of spiritual energy into it. However, when he probed it, he felt that the circulation of his magic power wasn't smooth, as if the treasure was rejecting him. He guessed that this treasure could only be activated with a special secret technique, and was not fated to have it. After pondering for a moment, he put it away in a stream of water, then turned around and asked, "Who are you to Duan Xiangzhou?" The scholar's magic power was exhausted, and he could only watch helplessly as his treasure was taken away. When he heard this, he forced himself to sit up straight, then cupped his hands and said, "I'm Song Chuyuan. Duan Xiangzhou is my senior brother from the same sect." Zhang Yan nodded and said, "I've observed the Taoist techniques of your senior and junior brothers, and they seem to be from the great corpse cult of the past." Song Chuyuan smiled bitterly and said, "You have good eyesight." Zhang Yan's eyes shone brightly, and he asked in a deep voice, "Just now, you want to make a move against me?" May I know what I have that you've taken a fancy to? Song Chuyuan said bitterly, to tell you the truth, my senior brother cultivates a corpse formation technique in the cult, but he still lacks a corpse refinement main formation. This can only be refined with the body of a Yuanian cultivator, but such a person is a respected figure in a region, so how could he do it so easily? And this place is desolate and uninhabited, so he's not afraid of the news being leaked, so he's tempted. When he said this, he glanced at Zhang Yan, and couldn't help but ask, may I know how my senior brother is? Zhang Yan said indifferently, his body was crushed and his soul was destroyed. Song Chuyuan's body trembled. As a member of an evil sect, he was most afraid of lightning techniques. Not only could it restrain evil mysterious techniques, but under this technique, even his original spirit would be destroyed, and there would be no hope of reincarnation. He forced himself to remain calm and said, then, how will you deal with me? Zhang Yan only smiled and didn't answer. Song Chuyuan could already see the result from his expression. He sighed and said dejectedly, us senior brothers and junior brothers wanted to harm others, so we reap what we sow. But can you lend me 16 years of my life? Lend you life? Zhang Yan turned to the side, looked him up and down, and said with a smile, if you can tell me the reason, I might allow you. Song Chuyuan smiled bitterly and said, although my corpse clamor cult is scattered now, the disciples are always thinking of reviving the sect. Back then, when the mountain gate was broken, the founder hid the talisman of the Tao book in a secret place, waiting for the disciples of the later generation to come and retrieve it. The whereabouts of this item is only known by us two brothers. Now that my senior brother is dead, if I die as well, our cult will no longer have any hope of reviving. Can you allow me to hand over the sect's secret book to a fellow disciple, and then come and receive my death? When he said this, he added another sentence, as long as you promise, I am willing to offer up all the wealth I've accumulated for the past 100 years. 16 years? Zhang Yan raised his eyebrows. Are you going to the gathering of the dragon pillars? Song Chuyuan nodded repeatedly and said, so you also know about this matter. 16 years later, it will be the final battle between the Zhongtai sect and the Xianyu cult. This battle will determine the ownership of the dragon pillars. For this, the Zhongtai sect has recruited cultivators from all over the world, and they don't mind coming from the same sect. In my opinion, when my fellow disciples who are scattered outside hear about this, they will definitely go, so I have this plan. Zhang Yan thought for a moment and said, although you are junior brother Duan Xiangzhou, seeing that you haven't attacked me just now, I can spare you this time, but you must make an oath that for these 16 years, you must listen to my orders. In the future, unless you are an enemy, you must not arbitrarily harm the lives of others. When Song Chuyuan heard this, his face revealed an excited expression, and he immediately took out 2 talismans, using his own blood essence to make an oath. He swallowed one, and gave the other to Zhang Yan. Zhang Yan took the talisman and put it in his sleeve. At this moment, he seemed to suddenly notice something strange, and his eyes flashed. A sword light flew out from between his eyebrows, and with a clang, it nailed something to the stone. When he turned around to look, he saw that it was a straw doll. At this moment, it was like a living person, and it was struggling there with all its might, letting out whimpering sounds. When Song Chuyuan saw this thing, he blurted out, dolls of sorrow and happiness? Zhang Yan asked, fellow Taoist Song, do you recognize this thing? Song Chuyuan's eyes revealed a complicated expression, and he sighed, this is my senior brother's magic treasure. Back then, before Master passed away, he gave the 2 of us an item. One is the lifeless coffin that was taken away by your excellency, and the other is this dolls of sorrow and happiness. This magic treasure has the ability to replace death, but there is one bad thing, and that is that this thing has 2 sexes, one good and one evil. When you use it, if it happens to be of good nature, as long as you feed it with your blood essence, it can follow the current generation's calamity. But if it meets with evil nature, it will shamelessly shirk, and in short, it will think of a way to not let you get what you want. Just now, senior brother used it in a moment of desperation, but he didn't manage to escape with his life. Then, they started a technique and a gust of astral wind was drawn over to wrap around their bodies. He fled as fast as lightning. Yuanian cultivators could all go above the heavens and borrow the astral winds to fly. Ordinary cultivators rarely had the chance to encounter them. Previously, Zhang Yan was searching for a place to set up the earthly fire heavenly furnace, which was why he was flying below the astral clouds. If Song Chuyuan and the other person hadn't been searching for a fellow disciple, they wouldn't have run into the restriction he had set up on the surface. When the two of them set off, it was almost sunset. After flying for 2 hours, the sun was already leaning towards the west. At this moment, Song Chuyuan slowed down and looked down for a moment. He pointed and said, "Taoist master, that mountain boundary is below us." Zhang Yan also looked over. Below them was a tall mountain that stretched from north to south. However, the shape of the mountain was fragmented and messy. There were dangerous ravines and undercurrents everywhere. In the mountain, there were dangerous rocks that looked like collapsed pillars stacked on top of each other. It was rugged and lofty. A crystalline white stream flowed out from the cracks of the dangerous cliffs and lingered between the crushed rocks. The sound of water was clear and bright. At the end of the stream was actually a bamboo forest. It filled up a valley that was less than 100 acres in size. There were dangerous obstacles all around, and the clouds blocked the moon. It was difficult for birds to pass through. Smoke rose from the ravines in the depths, and the clouds shrouded the mist. If one flew past in the sky, it would be hard to notice if one didn't pay attention. Song Chuyuan lowered his body and descended to the top of a cliff. He glanced at it for a moment and then used a technique to touch his eyelids. When he opened them again, there was a layer of green light in his eyes. He actually looked out a few miles into the depths of the valley. Zhang Yan also descended and looked around. Just now, he couldn't see clearly from the top of the mountain. Now that he was near the foot of the mountain, he discovered that there were caves that looked like ant nests. There were hundreds of them, and he didn't know which one was the place where the corpse cult hid the book. Thinking that Song Chuyuan was using a technique to search, he stood to the side and didn't disturb him. After a moment, Song Chuyuan let out a sigh of relief and turned around. He bowed and said, "Spiritual master, there is a restriction 5 miles in front of us that prevents me from looking. That will be the restriction in front of the mansion. I can only ask spiritual master to help break it." Zhang Yan looked down and took a step forward. He took out a talisman and held it between his fingers. He shook it slightly, and a ball of true fire appeared. Then he flicked his finger, and the talisman shot out like a fire shuttle, straight into the bamboo forest. After looking at it for a moment, he had an idea. As the saying goes, stones from other mountains can be used to study jade. After he came to the Dongsheng continent, in order to teach the way of restriction to his disciples, he had carefully studied the famous restriction formations in the continent. Thus, he was not unfamiliar with the restriction formations of this continent. The Dongsheng continent was different from the Donghua continent. Because there were many celestial cities, regardless of whether it was the restriction formations or the restriction formations, most of them leaned towards the path of defense. Although the restriction in front of him had many changes, because the person who set it up didn't purposely hide it, he could tell with one look that it was born out of one of the Dongxing 9 forces formation, the Long Spirit Crouching Plate formation. To break the formation, as long as he found the root and the vein, all that was left was time. He made some calculations in his mind and said, "Fellow Taoist Song, please protect me." Song Yuanchu hurriedly said, "I understand." He once again went up to the clouds. Although he didn't see anyone along the way, because this matter involved him, he didn't dare to be careless. Zhang Yan sat down cross-legged and took out a bunch of bamboo tokens. He threw them on the ground and focused on deducing. After around 2 hours, he found the path to the entrance. He lightly smiled and struck a few seals at the restriction. Rumbling sounds resounded, and the restriction was easily broken by him. He used the spiritual machine to explore. Not long after, he encountered another restriction. This was not out of his expectations. The Dongsheng continent was particular about people being the master of the formation and the formation being the support. They believed that if there was no one guarding it, there was no formation that couldn't be broken. Thus, unless it was a celestial city, they rarely used a large formation that consumed precious materials. Usually, they would set up dozens of small formations, layer by layer, and at the same time, they would set up blood warnings. If outsiders came, they would alarm the owner before they even entered. The person who set up this restriction formation obviously walked this path. Within a few days, Zhang Yan had consecutively broken through more than 10 forbidden doors. The deeper he went, the more complicated it became. Furthermore, it was connected to the spiritual qi of the mountains and rivers here. If Song Chuyuan was here to grind it down with his transcendence energy, not to mention tens of years, he wouldn't even be able to open it in 100 years. However, he wasn't impatient and treated it as studying formations. On the 9th day, Song Chuyuan heard a rumbling sound in the valley, startling countless birds. He couldn't help but get excited. He jumped down from the cliff and came to Zhang Yan's side. The scenery in front of him was very different from before. On the mountain wall, there was a cave door that was 10 feet tall. The 2 stone doors were wide open, but it was dark inside and it was difficult to see what was inside. At this moment, there was a loud roar that shook the whole mountain. Suddenly, a person rushed out from inside the cave. This person wore a bronze-fanged mask and wore jade armor. He held a dagger axe in both hands, and with his movement, dirty wind and dirty smoke surged out from behind him. He first raised his head to take a look, then he rushed towards the 2 of them. Zhang Yan's eyes flashed slightly. Immediately, a large hand formed by yellow smoke came out from the high cloud above him. With a slap, that person was struck down from midair. Even if it was a Yuanian cultivator, if he didn't have a protective treasure light, he would be crippled even if he didn't die from this attack. However, the man just fell to the ground, but he stood up as if nothing had happened. He roared at the sky and rushed up again. Song Chuyuan was shocked and said, "Vigorous demonic corpse?" He took a closer look and seemed to have thought of something. He hurriedly made a spell and pointed at it. Just now, the demonic corpse that was still ferocious instantly froze and stopped moving. Song Chuyuan wiped off the cold sweat on his head and said to Zhang Yan, "Spiritual master, this demonic corpse is refined from the body of a cultivator of the path of strength. It has infinite strength and is impervious to fire and water. Its body sturdiness is no less than a talisman. Luckily, it's an item without an owner now. I can use the secret technique passed down by my sect to control it. If I were to face it head-on, I wouldn't be its opponent." Zhang Yan nodded. This refined corpse must be used to guard the cave. If other cultivators came here today, they would probably suffer. So he said, "Since this is an important place of your sect, I won't enter." After saying that, he swung his sleeve and a ball of black light flew towards him. Song Chuyuan unconsciously reached out to catch it, but he realized that it was the lifeless treasure coffin in his hand. He was stunned and said, "Spiritual master, this?" Zhang Yan smiled and said, "This originally belonged to fellow Song. Now it's returned to its rightful owner." This talisman was not compatible with his technique. Even if he forcefully refined it, he might not be able to control it as he wished. It wasn't very useful in his hands. Previously, he took it to prevent the other party from playing any tricks. Now that he had made an oath, he naturally didn't need to worry about this. Moreover, from his point of view, with a Yuanian cultivator working for his sect, its value was much higher than a dead object. Although Song Chuyuan also knew this item was after all a killing weapon. It was one of the few talismans in the Dongsheng continent. Taking a step back, even if it was taken to the celestial city, it could be exchanged for many good things. How many people wouldn't be tempted to get their hands on it? After taking Zhang Yan as his master, he originally didn't expect to get it back. Now that he had lost it, his heart couldn't help but be excited. He unconsciously took a deep breath and then bowed solemnly. He said, "Spiritual master, please follow me inside." Zhang Yan raised his eyebrows. "But is there a restriction inside?" Song Chuyuan lowered his head and said, "Please forgive this lowly one for hiding something from you earlier. Not only does this cave have the sect's official seal, there is also a secret storehouse hidden by Master Ancestor. It was originally used to restore the sect, and there are quite a few heavenly materials and earthly treasures inside. If the Taoist master has a use for them, you can take them all. When the corpse cult was attacked by the disciples of the two sects, Song Chuyuan's ancestor, Liao Chuxian, took the sect's official seal and fled here to hide. However, very few people knew that he had previously swept away all the treasures in the Celestial City and didn't let the Zhongtai sect or the Feng Xiang sect take them. Zhang Yan thought for a moment. The many pill materials he wanted to find were all condensed within essence qi. It wasn't easy to find them in the 5 sects, but an evil sect like the corpse cult might have some. He didn't hesitate and nodded. All right, I'll follow you into the cave to take a look. If you like this work, I welcome you to come to Starting Point and vote for me. Your support is my greatest motivation. For mobile users, please read it here. Chapter 654. Zhang Yan and Song Chuyuan stepped into the cave. In front of them was a passageway made of bricks and stones. On both sides of the stone walls, there were long burning lamps. The candlelight was faint, and from time to time, male and female ghost faces would appear, crying and laughing at the two of them. These were the evil spirits that were imprisoned here, used to guard the cave. Song Chuyuan was a disciple of the corpse cult, so he did not look at them. Zhang Yan's expression was the same as usual. If it wasn't for the protection of this place, with the spiritual aura of the two of them, they would be able to shatter these evil spirits from a few miles away. The deeper they went into the passageway, the heavier the evil spirit became. About a moment later, a cave of several acres in size appeared in front of them. The top of the cave was polished to the point that it was as smooth as water. There were 3 pits below. 2 pits were filled with the bones of pigs, sheep, cows, and horses, while the one in the middle was filled with human bones. There were at least tens of thousands of them. Song Chuyuan looked at Zhang Yan's expression and carefully explained, "Shinren, this is the tomb of a feudal vassal. These bones were not made by the ancestors of our cult, but the vassal's sacrifice. Although our sect refines corpse tools, we also have strict rules. We must not kill ordinary people indiscriminately. Ever since I started cultivating, I have never dared to violate it." Zhang Yan did not comment. He heard that the disciples of the corpse cult usually hid in desolate tombs in order to refine corpses. Presumably, this place was the same. Even if there were strict rules, it was inevitable that such behavior would not be tolerated by the world. The two of them walked around the pit and saw 7 coffins at the end. The lids were all pasted with talismans, but one of them had already been opened, and the lid was slanted to the side. Song Chuyuan walked closer, looked at the empty coffin and said, "This should be the location of the vigorous corpse demon spirit coffin outside the cave. The talismans must have loosened, so it ran out." He walked around the remaining 6 coffins. His eyes could not help but shine, and he gently exhaled. Immediately, a wind blew, blowing away all the talismans on the coffins. After waiting for a moment, there was movement in the 6 coffins. With several banging sounds, the coffin lids were lifted to one side. Song Chuyuan hurriedly cast a spell and pointed forward. Previously, this spell was able to suppress the vigorous corpse demon, but now it didn't seem to listen to him. The refined corpse in the coffin seemed like it was about to climb out. However, he did not panic. He took out the lifeless coffin that Zhang Yan had returned to him and released a gray fog that instantly covered the area below. He then said, "Withdraw." The mist instantly dissipated. He returned to the lifeless treasure coffin. When he looked at the 6 coffins again, they were already empty. His expression was very happy. He turned to Zhang Yan and said, "Reverend, these corpses were left behind by this lowly one's master ancestor. With these corpses, after 16 years on the dragon pillar, even if it's a second Yuanian cultivator, this lowly one has the confidence to fight." Zhang Yan nodded. These words were not empty words. The corpse cult was the last of the 3 evil sects to be eradicated. Naturally, there was a reason for it. Its tyrannical aspect was that the refined corpse left by the master could be used by the disciple. Just now, he had also seen the vigorous corpse demon. If a normal Yuanian cultivator were to face it head-on, he was afraid that he would not be able to do anything. after withdrawing the refined corpse. The two continued to go in. Not long after, they had entered the depths of the mausoleum. They arrived at a spacious hall. This place was like a marquis's mansion, with jade railings and gold and stone floors. A bronze sparrow sun-chasing lamp hung above, although it was as bright as day. On both sides there were dark red curtains, and every 10 steps, a layer of gauze was hung. On both sides of the road, there were hundreds of gold and silver utensils, all filled with jade beads and agate, which were all buried with him. It was obvious that the Marquis's status was quite high. At the end of the cave, there was only a stone wall. Above it was a purple copper eave, and below it was black and green bricks. The gap between the bricks was a finger wide, and mercury slowly flowed inside. On the left and right sides of the wall, there were 5 doors. The inside was dark, and no one knew how deep it was. Seeing that Song Chuyuan was hesitant to move forward, Zhang Yan couldn't help but ask, "Fellow Song, could it be that you don't know where to go?" Song Chuyuan hurriedly said, "Reverend, only one of these 10 doors is real. If you enter carelessly, the hidden treasures in the cave will definitely be destroyed." At this point, he seemed to suddenly remember something. He slapped his forehead and said, "I forgot that there should be a Yu Ling from my sect here. Once this lowly one summons it, I will know." He took 2 steps back and pinched his fingers to make a sign. Not long after, a beautiful figure actually floated down from the wall. Zhang Yan turned his head to take a look. This woman was wearing a hair bun with a hairpin inserted horizontally. She wore a short skirt and a jade belt around her waist. Her figure was graceful, but upon closer inspection, her facial features were actually drawn with a brush. It was extremely stiff. So it turned out that she was just a paper person. The paper girl silently arrived in front of the two of them and bowed to Song Chuyuan. Then she pointed to a passageway on the right that was close to the corner of the wall. Song Chuyuan clapped his hands and said, "Done." After finding the correct path, the two of them followed this slanted downwards passageway for about 300 meters before arriving inside another cave. There was nothing else here other than a stone slab that was 3 meters long and 3 meters wide on the ground. On it was a picture of 9 ghosts devouring a heart, and it looked sinister and terrifying. Song Chuyuan took out a blood jade bracelet from his sleeve and lightly shook it downwards. The stone slab rumbled and moved backwards, revealing a hole. Zhang Yan glanced at it. Below was a stone room that was 10 steps wide. In the middle was a large black glazed vat that was sealed with white mud. On top of the vat was a wooden ox head, and the nose ring was rather similar to the blood jade bracelet that Song Chuyuan was holding. Song Chuyuan's mood was clearly rather excited. He jumped down and looked at the ox head, thinking to himself, "The books that my grandmaster brought out that day should all be here." He rolled up his sleeve and put the item into his sleeve. Only then did he cast his gaze on the large vat, knowing that the storehouse should be inside. However, after inspecting it once, he revealed a difficult expression. He raised his head and said, "This white mud is refined by mixing tan grass paste into the beard of the ink ghost. It can't be forcefully opened with brute force. It needs 2 Yuanian cultivators to use the yang fire to refine it, and only then can it be opened. If Jinren wants to take the items inside, I'm afraid you'll have to wait for a period of time." Zhang Yan didn't mind and said with a smile, "There's no need to rush. After returning to the sect, it won't be too late to think of a way." Song Chuyuan hurriedly agreed. The two of them put away the large vat and quickly left this place. They sealed the door of the cave and then flew up into the sky, heading back to Zhangzhou Peak. 3 days later, Zhang Yan and Song Chuyuan returned to Deep Abyss sect together. As soon as they entered the sect, he called Zhang Boyan over and ordered him to think of a way to open the layer of mud with Song Chuyuan, while he himself returned to the cave. He entered a meditative state to cultivate. However, the moment he sat down, he felt that his body was different from before. There was a strange feeling surging up, as if an opportunity was right in front of him. Unconsciously, he moved his mind and immediately got rid of all distracting thoughts. He simply sealed the door of the mansion and ignored the outside world, focusing on cultivating his skills. Under the operation of the Shen technique, the Jun Yang essence in the high cloud was turned into the purest spiritual energy. under the guidance of his spirit, it flowed into his limbs and bones, and then traveled back and forth in his meridians. Every time it traveled, the high cloud above his head would solidify a little, and the mana around him would grow stronger. He didn't think about it in advance. Unknowingly, it was already the 7th year of his closed-door cultivation. On this day, he felt that the inside of his body was bright, and the accumulated spiritual pool was finally overflowing. He smiled and let his chi activity rise. It climbed to the top of his head, and then rushed out of the door. His body shook slightly, and the 3rd high cloud above his head suddenly solidified. With a rumble, a Yuanying leaped out and floated in midair. Its body emitted a dazzling brilliance. At this moment, hundreds of disciples in Deep Abyss sect were still having their morning class. However, they felt a tremor under their feet, as if the mountains were shaking. Only then did a muffled sound came from afar. Everyone looked up and was stunned, and then a deep shock emerged in their hearts. Streams of 5-colored light were released from the peak of the mountain, and at this moment, all the spiritual energy on Tsangju Peak was gathering towards the peak. Because it was too violent, even the high cloud in the sky had a vortex of 100 miles in size, and there were occasional flashes of lightning. Chu Mu ran, Zhaoge and Wen Liang sensed it and ran out of the cave abode. They looked at the strange phenomenon in the sky, and a thought appeared in their minds. Sect Master Shixiang has broken through to the next realm. Mao Yi Sect Huanghua Hall. Bai Jing was in the hall discussing with a group of elders. After Yong Fu passed away, he took over the position of sect master. His cultivation was the highest in the sect, and he was also the eldest disciple of the previous sect master, so it was natural for this to happen. However, at this moment he didn't look too good. After the battle between Yong Fu and Zhang Yan, although Yong Fu gave up the position of Celestial City Master, Mount E sect did not offer any tribute like the other sections. Since Yong Fu's death, Bai Jing felt that Mount E sect was not as good as before, and felt that this matter must not be repeated, so he intended to make up for the tribute. However, as soon as this idea came out, it was strongly opposed by a few core formation elders in the sect. One of the elders said, Hanyuan School has only been in glory for 10 years. Mount E sect has been in charge of Celestial City for hundreds of years, and our roots are deep. We only worship Zhong Tai as our upper sect. Why do we need to listen to Priest Zhang? Bai Jing said in a deep voice, Uncle Master Mo, before Master died, he had repeatedly told us that we must respect the disciples of Hanyuan. His meaning is self-evident. Mount E sect is deep in the Shenwu Mountain, and since Hanyuan School is the Celestial City Master, we should obey. The elder was thinking about something when a disciple rushed into the hall and shouted, Sect Master Shixiang, Sect Master Shixiang. He looked displeased and scolded, Why are you making such a big fuss? When Shixiang was here, there were no such unruly disciples. Bai Jing could not help but frown when he heard him scold the locust. He looked down and said, Shixiang, why are you so flustered? The disciple pointed outside and said, Shixiang, quickly come and see, there seems to be some changes over at Hanyuan School. Bai Jing was stunned. He immediately went down the jade steps and left the hall. A few elders looked at each other and followed him out. Everyone looked towards the southeast direction and saw that 1,000 miles away, there was a cloud whirling, as if a gap had opened in the sky. Seeing such a scene, everyone was shocked. An elder said, Could this be a demon cultivator's tribulation? Bai Jing felt that the spiritual vigor in the sky seemed to be gathering on the Vermilion Peak outside. Although he looked calm on the surface, his heart was in turmoil. He shook his head and said, It's not like that. I heard Master say that if a cultivator's mana is strong and unparalleled, when he breaks through to the next realm, he can trigger a phenomenon of heaven and earth. In Hanyuan School, there is only one person with such a cultivation, Immortal Zhang. If I am not wrong, this sect master's cultivation is one level higher. The elders were stunned. A cultivator breaking through to the next realm could actually trigger a phenomenon of heaven and earth. How strong must his mana be? Elders, Bai Jing turned around and looked around. He said in a deep voice, What I said earlier, Does anyone have any objections? P.S. I came home a little late, but I still made it up. Chapter 655. After Zhang Yan had broken through to the next realm, he carefully comprehended for a while before slowly suppressing his aura. The raging billows around him also gradually retracted. Sensing that someone had arrived outside the cave, he said in a clear voice, "Junior brothers, come in." Chu Mu ran, Wen Liang, and Zhao Ge entered the cave. Chu Mu ran looked at Zhang Yan and said respectfully, "We are here to congratulate immortal Zhang Yan's great progress in cultivation." Then he bowed. Wen and Zhao Gu also bowed together. Zhang Yan smiled and nodded, "Junior apprentice brothers, please rise." After the three of them stood up, Wen Liang suddenly sighed, "I wonder when we three will be able to cultivate to the same level as senior apprentice brother." Zhang Yan laughed brightly, "The great way is boundless and immortality is hard to come by. I am just a step ahead of everyone else." Zhao Gu was usually diligent in his cultivation. Seeing that Zhang Yan was in a good mood, he took the opportunity to ask a few questions about his cultivation. Zhang Yan had just entered the second stage of yuanying, so he had time to spare. Whenever Zhao Ge asked a question, he would answer it patiently. Chu Mu ran and Wen Liang listened to the questions and answers from the side. They felt that they had learned a lot and would occasionally add a sentence. Unknowingly, half a day had passed. At this moment, Jingyu said, "Master, sect leader Bai of Mount Yi heard that sect leader has made great progress in cultivation and specially sent a congratulatory gift." "Humph," Wen Liang snorted and said, "In the past, Mount Yi always used all sorts of excuses to get things done, but today they came very quickly." Zhang Yan said, "Bring it in." Jingyu walked into the cave and went straight to Zhang Yan. He held up the gift with both hands and said, "Master, the gift list is here." Zhang Yan glanced at him. Jingyu had once served under He Jinghuan in the past, so he was very perceptive. If it wasn't for the fact that there was something special about this item, he probably wouldn't have specially given it to him. Thus, he took a look at it and couldn't help but chuckle. He then passed the list back to Chu Mu Ran and said, "My three junior brothers, take a look as well." Chu Mu Ran was the first to receive it. After reading it, he chuckled and passed it to Wen Liang. The latter cast a sidelong glance and snorted coldly. At least they know how to appreciate favors. Zhao Ge took the list and skimmed it several times. "Has Mount Yi paid the tribute they owed?" he asked in astonishment. Wen Liang scoffed coldly, "Isn't it because he saw senior brother's great improvement in his cultivation and felt that it would be difficult for him to contend against you? That's why they rushed over to curry favor with him. If it were up to me, I'd return the gift list. When I need it, I'll go get it myself. There's no need for them to deliver it." Chu Mulan frowned and said, "Shitty, Mount Yi is under the protection of Zhongtai, how can we be reckless?" When Liang disdainfully said, "Now that Mount Yi does not have Yongdaoren to hold the fort, it is impossible for Mount Yi to be overseen." The Zhongtai sect was no longer the same as it was in the past. Although the Zhongtai sect was its superior sect, it could barely take care of itself now, so how could it stand up for them? "Senior brother, you are too cautious. With sect leader Shixiang here, what are you afraid of?" Chu Mu Ran repeatedly shook his head, disagreeing with what he said. Zhao Gu then said in a deep voice, "When Shixiang, after Master Yong passed away, Bai Jiang took over the position of sect leader. Although he was one generation lower than us, his temperament was steady and his aptitude was not bad. His natural endowments are not bad. The cultivation method of the sect leader of the Yishan Pai was passed on to him by Zhongtai. If nothing unexpected happens, it will not be difficult for him to reach yuanying in the future. Since he has admitted defeat, why should I reject him?" Zhang Yan nodded and said with a smile, "Zhao Shidi is right. Mount Shenwu is not our sect's territory. There's still a long way to go. Since Mount Yi has expressed goodwill, there's no need to reject it. When Shixiang, I know Mount Yi has made you suffer a lot that day, but Yong Fu has passed away and the rest are all juniors. There's no need for you to be angry with them. If you really don't like them, just ignore them in the future." When Liang cupped his hands and said, I will listen to sect leader Shixiang. Whatever you say. Zhang Yan pointed at Chu Mu Ran and said, Chu Shidi, go to Mount E on my behalf and take a bucket of Jinyao jade beads as a gift to calm them down. A bucket of Jinyao jade beads was only worth 1,000 spiritual shells. It was incomparable to Mount E's offerings. However, Zhang Yan's action showed that he had no intention of pursuing the matter. Chu Mu Ran bowed and said, I will arrange it now. Seeing him turn around and leave the cave, Wen and Zhao Shidi did not stay any longer and left. After the three of them left, Zhang Yan stood up and walked out of the cave. He went to the edge of the cliff and looked at the flowing river below. He began to think about the next step of his cultivation. To achieve the highest level of Yuanjin Dharmakaya, from this moment on, he could not refine any impurities into his body. The white moon essence that Zhou Changju gave him was only enough for a year. After a few more days, when his cultivation had stabilized, he would start to refine this item. Among the 3 rare ingredients, he had obtained quite a lot of ghost sunflower and crouching earth lotus. However, he was still lacking a lot of snake ring jewels. Although Zhang Boyun brought some back last time, it was just a drop in the bucket. His Dan had reached the 1st grade and he did not know how much pure spiritual essence he would need to cultivate to the 3rd level of Yuaning. Therefore, the more he prepared, the better. He thought to himself, next, other than cultivating, I will have to spend most of my energy on searching for this item. Thinking about this, he said to Jing Yu who was beside him, go and call Song Chuyuan. Song Chuyuan knew that his family background could not be seen in public. Therefore, after he entered the sect of Han Yuan, he did not go out except to cultivate. However, he did not dare to refine the corpse demon. He only dared to pick some powerful Dao techniques recorded in the books. When he heard that Zhang Yan had summoned him, he did not dare to hesitate. He quickly put down what he was doing and rushed to meet him. When he reached the peak, he paid his respects. He knew that this sect master's cultivation had improved greatly. He saw that his eyes were as bright as the stars, the spiritual energy around his body was like a tide, and the 3 clouds above his head shrouded the entire cave. He could not help but be shocked. He could roughly guess why Zhang Yan was looking for him. Without waiting for him to ask, he took the initiative and said, Shinran, ever since I arrived here, I have already checked the sect's storage. He took out a jade scroll from his sleeve and raised it above his head. I have recorded everything here. Zhang Yan's body did not move. With just a thought, he activated his mana and pulled the jade scroll over. The spiritual opportunity circulated inside and immediately understood what was going on. He then put it down and said, Fellow Song, you've been cultivating in my sect for 7 years. I'm sure you know what I'm looking for. Song Chuyuan hurriedly bowed and said, I have heard about it. After knowing about this, I have been paying attention. The items that Jinren needs are in our sect's storage. There is quite a lot of ghost sunflower and crouching earth lotus. I am willing to give them all to you. Only the snake ring jewel? He smiled bitterly. After all, this item needs to be condensed from 2 medicines. Even if it is refined, it will be used. However, I know one thing. 200 years ago, Zhongtai sect came to our sect to ask for this item in order to refine a magic weapon. However, for some reason, it did not seem to be refined successfully. I believe that there should be quite a lot left. Jinren, you can go there and ask about it. Zhang Yan's eyes flickered. Song Chuyuan's words were not false. The 6th prince of Chu was not a disciple of the evil sect. The snake ring jewel was useless to him. However, he could take it out so easily. It was obvious that he did not go to other places to collect it. From the meaning of the letter, there should be quite a lot left in his hands. He pondered for a while, then said, Fellow Daoist Song was originally a disciple of the Corpse Clamor sect. Do you know where I can find this item? He was just asking casually, but Song Chuyuan had clearly thought about this matter seriously. He cupped his hands and said, Shinran, there is an immortal city in the South Vast Sea. Although it is under the rule of Ku Xian sect, one of the 5 great sects, it was actually set up by the people of my evil sect. Although the snake ring jewel is rare, it should still be there. I am willing to share Jinren's worries and go there to purchase it. Zhang Yan smiled and glanced at him. Song Chuyuan hurriedly lowered his head. He could see that this cultivator of the evil sect had his own calculations. He was originally planning to go to that immortal city. However, he did not expose him. He only asked, "How long will fellow Daoist Song take to get there?" When Song Chuyuan heard that Zhang Yan did not seem to have any objections, he was delighted. He had the sect's treasury in his hands. As long as he went to that immortal city, he would be able to exchange for a lot of good things. It was truly inconvenient to cultivate in Cold Abyss sect. As long as he went to the outside world, he would be able to refine a lot of powerful corpse devils. At the time of the gathering of dragon pillars, his chances of winning would increase by a lot. He pretended to ponder and then said, "If everything goes smoothly, 1 year will be enough." Zhang Yan thought for a while and then said with a smile, "When fellow Daoist Song goes, I believe you will also want to see your old friends. There is no harm in coming back a little later." Song Chuyuan also knew that he had seen through his thoughts. He hurriedly bowed and said embarrassedly, "I will definitely not disappoint Jinren." Zhang Yan nodded and said no more. Jing Yu picked up the gong and lightly knocked it. Song Chuyuan was also tactful. After bowing deeply, he retreated down the mountain. Zhang Yan stood on the cliff for a while before returning to his cave abode to meditate. In the next few months, there was nothing important to do in Cold Abyss sect. Other than refining by Yuangshi every day, he would meditate and cultivate. Occasionally, he would come out to guide the disciples. Suddenly one day, when Zhang Yan was instructing 2 disciples, Jing Yu excitedly came to report, saying, "Master, Big Wang Nyangzi and Little Wang Nyangzi have returned to the mountain. They are respectfully waiting outside the door." Zhang Yan smiled and said, "It can be considered that it is time for them to return. Call them in." The Wang sisters came in from outside the door. Both of them were wearing plain dresses and looked like 2 white lotuses. When they saw Zhang Yan, they knelt down and kowtowed, saying in unison, "Greetings, Master." Zhang Yan carefully looked at the 2 of them. As expected, after going out to train, their temperament and spirit were very different from before. Wang Kaiwei was originally introverted. Looking at her now, her manner and mannerisms were more dignified. She faintly resembled Lu Yenni. On the other hand, Wang Kating's eyes were shining and she had a smile on her face. However, much of her impetuousness had been washed away and she was more reserved. The Wang sisters had been out traveling for more than 20 years. They had traveled all over Dongxing continent. Not only had they greatly broadened their horizons, they had also sharpened their Dao hearts. Now, their cultivation was extremely deep. Using the secret method passed down by Zhang Yan, Wang Kaiwei had burned 28 acupoints. Wang Kating, after all, had better aptitude, so she could burn 30 acupoints. However, it was difficult for her to progress any further. Thinking that their collection of elixirs was almost complete, they returned to the mountain together. Seeing that their cultivation had greatly improved and had not fallen behind, Zhang Yan also nodded in satisfaction and said, "Both of you rise." The 2 girls acknowledged and stood up. At this moment, Wang Kating pursed her lips and smiled. She used her elbow to touch Wang Kaiwei and said, "Sister, it is better for you to speak about that matter." Chapter 656. Wang Kaiwei unhappily glared at her younger sister, then bowed and said, "Master, please allow me to report. While searching for medicine, Kating and I met a nascent soul senior who insisted on taking me as his disciple. I clearly stated that I already have a master, but this person refused to give up and followed us, saying that he wanted to meet Master in person. After entering the territory of Chu, this person disappeared without a trace. Disciple and sister's cultivation level is not high enough, so we are unable to determine whether this person is following us or not." Literature Hall. Wang Kating interrupted. This person said his surname was Wei and he was a Kuan cultivator. He said that he was a cultivator from Mount 8 Tassels. My knowledge is shallow and I can't tell where he came from. However, he helped sister and me several times. Zhang Yan had also heard that if the cultivators of the big sects in Dongsheng continent saw that the disciples of the small sects had good talent, they would force them to change sections. This was not uncommon. This could weaken the potential of the small sects and save the trouble of looking for a suitable successor. The Wang sisters were not from the 5 big sects, so it was not strange for them to encounter such a thing. He thought for a while and asked, "Where did you two meet this person?" Wang Kaiwei replied, "Master, it was in Qin country." When she spoke up to this point, Wang Kading seemed to have thought of something and sighed. She raised her white wrist and withdrew a jade slip from her pouch. She passed it to Zhang Yan and asked for credit. "Master, when Big Sister and I were traveling outside, we recorded the terrain of all the mountains we passed by. There might be some omissions in the small areas, but there are absolutely no mistakes in the large areas." Zhang Yan chuckled and said, "This gift is not bad. I will accept it." Wang Caiwei's expression was slightly worried. She said, "Master, disciple sees that person has an obsession. He might come to the sect to pick a fight." Zhang Yan laughed and comforted her, "It's fine. No matter who comes, I will deal with them. Master will deal with them. All of you just cultivate in peace." Now that his cultivation had improved by leaps and bounds, even if he were to face a 3rd-level nascent soul cultivator, he wouldn't be afraid. Thus, he flew over and asked about another matter. "The matter I told you before, do the 2 of you have any progress?" Hearing him ask this question, the Wang sisters' expressions turned solemn. Wang Kaiwei took a step forward and said, "The 2 of us have also paid special attention to the boundary that Master instructed us to pay attention to. Within 100 miles, there is only a sect called Quantum Inn. Their influence is also rather great. There are 4 Yuanying Zenrins in the sect, and they control 3 immortal cities." That day, I told Daoist Shen that I would use 30 years to get an item. Now that the time is approaching, after the 2 of you have condensed your pills, one of you must return to Donghua continent. Wang Kading's beautiful eyes lit up and she said, "Master, disciple is willing." Wang Kaiwei also said, "Disciple is also willing." Zhang Yan stretched out his hand and smiled, saying, "The 2 of you don't need to ask for permission. After condensing your pills, whoever has a higher pill grade will go in place of Master." The Wang sisters quickly responded. Just when they lowered their heads, they suddenly felt a breeze in the cave. When they looked again, the bed was already empty. Wang Kaiwei was a little dazed as she said, "Master is already in the 2nd stage of Yuanying." Wang Kading smiled lightly and teased, "I'm afraid Sister is just guessing. With our cultivation, how can we tell what Master's cultivation is like?" Wang Kaiwei smiled slightly and said, "Although I don't know, Sister Yin has this ability." Wang Kading finally believed it. When the 2 sisters went out to travel, they had met with danger several times. During this period, it was thanks to this killer Yin blade that they were able to turn misfortunes into blessings. To say that the spirit in the blade, although it was sometimes unreasonable, it had never been wrong in judging a person's cultivation. Zhang Yan descended from the peak and rode the strong wind. He walked at a moderate speed towards the middle of the mountain. Not long after, he reached the middle of the mountain. After entering the main hall, he looked over and saw a Taoist nun standing in the middle of the hall. She held a horsetail whisk in her hand and her back was as straight as a spear. Although she was a woman, she was extremely tall. She had a high nose bridge, slanted eyes, and a thin mouth. Her face was long and narrow and her chin was slightly sharp. Her eyes were sharp and her body emitted a faint sense of dignity. Zhang Yan nodded slightly. A person with this kind of bearing must have some background. Those cultivators from small sects could not be compared to her. When he looked at this Taoist nun, she was also looking at him with a scrutinizing gaze. After looking for a while, there was a slight surprise in her eyes and she asked, "You are the head of Hanyuan sect, spiritual master Zhang?" Zhang Yan bowed and said, "That's right, I am." The Taoist nun nodded and said, "You are quite a character." She paused and waved her horsetail whisk and said, "I am not good at beating around the bush. This time, I came because I have taken a fancy to a disciple under sect leader Zhang. I want to take him as my disciple." Zhang Yan smiled and walked to the main seat. He then gestured and said, "Why don't you sit down and talk?" The Taoist nun frowned and waved her horsetail whisk. She then went to the guest seat at the side and sat down. Zhang Yan also sat down and said, "How should I address you?" The Taoist nun said with a stiff tone, "Surname Wei, Chi practitioner of Mount Basie." Zhang Yan didn't mind and said, "May I ask, which part of I's disciple does Taoist fancy?" Taoist nun Wei said coldly, "This is a minor detail, but there is nothing that can't be said to others." Since sect leader Zhang asked, "I can tell you. Before I entered Tao, I was once the commandant of the state of Yu and was skilled in saber techniques. After cultivating, I painstakingly researched and created a set of flying saber techniques. I believe it is not inferior to the sword techniques of the Fengxiang sect." At this point, there was an uncontrollable arrogance in her expression and tone. "Although I still have 300 to 400 years of lifespan, I still lack a disciple to inherit my mantle. That day, I met your disciple by chance. Her aptitude and nature are all to my liking. I hope that spiritual Master Zhang will give her to me. If you have any conditions, feel free to state them." When Zhang Yan heard the two-word state of you, his heart moved and he had more or less guessed this person's background. He cupped his hands and said, "My disciple has also mentioned this matter to me. I heard that Taoist friend has helped me many times and I still have to thank you. As for the matter of changing sex, let's just forget about it." Taoist nun Wei was silent for a while and said, "I see that sect leader Zhang's cultivation is profound and has already reached the second stage of yuaning. However, when one reaches the cultivation of spiritual master, every step forward is as difficult as ascending to the heavens. Since you are not from the orthodox sects, I believe that you also lack techniques to study. I have 12 Tao books here, 6 are superior techniques and 6 are remarkable techniques. Sect leader Zhang only needs to give that disciple to me and I can take any 2 of them." Zhang Yan smiled faintly and said, "I have my own sect's inheritance and can directly ask about the great Tao. There is no need to peek at other sects' techniques." Taoist nun Wei's face revealed a mocking expression. Even the 5 major sects did not dare to ask about the great Tao. The Shenwu mountain was only a wild and desolate place, so how could it have such superior techniques? In her eyes, what Zhang Yan said was only a bargaining tactic and wanted to extract more benefits from her. However, this was exactly what she wanted, so she made another condition: "I have 3 magic weapons in my sect's possession. They are all profound level weapons. If sect leader Zhang agrees, I can make the decision to give them to Taoist friend. Is this enough?" Zhang Yan slowly shook his head and said in a deep voice, "Taoist friend does not need to trouble yourself. I am a man of my words. My disciple will not change sections." Taoist nun Wei suddenly felt somewhat impatient. She believed that no matter where she put the conditions, they would be generous enough. Even the cultivators of the 5 major sects would be moved. However, this person was not willing to relent. He was too greedy. However, she really liked this disciple, so she was willing to pay any price. She tried her best to speak in a calm tone. "Sect leader Zhang, what exactly do you want? Just tell me directly. As long as it is in the Dongshan continent, I, Wei Shuling, can get it for you." Zhang Yan smiled faintly and stood up. He said, "There is no need to discuss this matter anymore. Taoist friend has come from afar and is a guest. If you are interested, you can stay here for a few days. I still have important matters to attend to in my sect, so forgive me for not accompanying you." Finished speaking, he waved his sleeve and walked towards the back of the hall. Taoist nun Wei could not help but be startled. Even after Zhang Yan had left, she still seemed to be somewhat in disbelief. Soon after, anger suddenly welled up in her heart. However, she also knew that she was in someone else's territory and could not easily flare up. Otherwise, she would be the one to suffer. After standing in the same place for a while, she angrily stamped her foot and turned into a rainbow light as she left the hall. Chapter 657. After Taoist nun Wei left the cold abyss gate, her expression was ice cold. // This article comes from, she knew that she had an extraordinary background and had personally come to negotiate with them. Yet she was turned away at the door. She felt humiliated. Although there was a ball of anger in her chest, she was still calm. No matter how small the house of Han Yuan was, it was still the ruler of a celestial city in the Shenwu Mountain. That sect leader Zhang's cultivation level was similar to hers. Unless there was help from a fellow Taoist, there was nothing she could do. Her roots were in the south of Dongsheng continent, but she did not know many people here. She frowned and thought for a while, then suddenly remembered, oh yes, there is a Taoist Lu in Chu country's Huakong Mountain. I heard that his cultivation is profound, and he is resourceful. He is also an old friend of Uncle Master. Why don't I visit him first and ask him for advice? After she made up her mind, she took out a wooden box and held it in her palm. She chanted a spell in her mouth and took out a horsetail whisk. In a split second, colorful lights dyed the clouds and transformed into a flying boat. It was 12 feet long and inside it was a soft cushion couch. Beautiful embroidered curtains and silver hooks hung high. On top of the table were lacquered boxes, gold wares, and mirrors. All of them were gorgeous and exquisite. She stepped inside and sat down on the couch. Then she flew the flying boat towards the south. A few days later, the flying boat entered the territory of the Zhongtai sect. After determining the direction, she flew southwest along a large river that ran from the north to the south. After traveling for another day, they found the location of the Fire Hole Mountain near the Seymour Sea boundary. This place was flat and vast, with a view of 10,000 li. The shape of the mountain was peculiar, like a mound or a grave. It rose from the flat ground and faced the ocean, standing alone. From time to time, thick smoke and fog would rise from the summit of the mountain, rumbling and rolling up into the clouds. When the flying boat was 5 miles away from them, she felt that there was a restriction in front of her, so she couldn't go any further. Thus, she retreated to the sky and said, "Is Marshal Uncle Lu here?" Disciple Wei Shuling of Mount 8 Tassels is here to pay her respects. She shouted 3 times in a row. After a while, a deep voice came from the mountain. So it's a disciple from the small warehouse realm. I'm currently transferring my power, so please forgive me for not being able to come out to greet you. There's fire poison outside, so I can't stay for long. Please come to the Shady Cool Temple. As the man spoke, the restrictions outside the mountain bloomed like a lotus flower, unraveling layer by layer. Taoist Nun Wei didn't hesitate and waved her horsetail whisk to activate the flying boat to descend. At this moment, a ray of golden light flew over. It was a fire-plumed golden sparrow. Its tail feathers were unusually long and were dotted with sparks. It was extremely beautiful. As it neared, it suddenly transformed into a young lady with jade-like bones and smooth skin. Holding a circular fan, she bowed to Wei Xiaobao and said, "Wei Daozhong, please come with your servant." Taoist Nun Wei nodded. He followed the girl into the mountain pass. Wherever she passed, the girl would wave her circular fan and the smoke in front of her would disperse. After flying for a few miles, she saw that the scenery around her was like the wind blowing on the surface of the water. Ripples spread out, and countless mountain stone pavilions were born and destroyed, clearly appearing out of thin air. She was inwardly shocked. The restrictions here were so strict that they could almost compare to the grand formation of a large sect. She thought to herself, I heard from Marshal Uncle that this senior is hiding here to hide from a great enemy. Looking at this setup, it must be true. Not long after, the view in front of her suddenly opened up. A small hill appeared in front of her. The terrain was gentle and the mountain stream was murmuring. There was a Taoist temple standing on top of it. At the foot of the hill, there were hundreds of houses. It was close to the hill on one side and the river on the other. The trees were lush and shady and there were paths connecting to each other outside. There were 3 to 5 farmers wearing bamboo hats working in the fields. It was a beautiful scene of the countryside. The outside world was filled with smoke and fire, but this place looked like a paradise. The 2 of them landed in front of the Taoist temple. The girl said, "Wei Taoist, please come in. My master is waiting inside." Taoist Nun Wei didn't bother with pleasantries and walked inside. After passing through the mountain gate, she saw 12 green stone lotus seats on both sides. Further ahead was a brass incense burner. A Taoist was standing on the steps with 2 female servants holding swords beside him. The Taoist had fair skin and phoenix eyes. There were 3 tufts of green beard on his chin. He wore a cloth robe and his smile was very gentle. There were 2 strong clouds above his head that looked like flying flames. But Taoist Nun Wei took a look and felt that this person's appearance was different from what she remembered. She frowned and her tone also became colder. She said, "Is this Taoist from the same sect as Martial Uncle Lu?" The Taoist chuckled and said, "Sung Tsong Luan, Martial Brother Lu died 10 years ago and reincarnated." When Taoist Nun Wei heard this, she couldn't help but feel disappointed. She said, "Since Martial Uncle Lu is no longer here, Martial Nephew will take her leave." Sung Tsong Luan took a step forward and called out to her, "Martial Nephew Wei, don't be in such a hurry to leave. Based on the friendship between our 2 sects, Martial Nephew Wei has come to and I have to treat you well. Otherwise, when people from the same sect talk about it in the future, I'm afraid they will scold me, Sung Tsong Luan, for being unreasonable." Taoist Nun Wei stopped and thought about it. She said indifferently, "That's fine too." Sung Tsong Luan was secretly delighted. He thought to himself, "It's rare to see someone from the small granary realm. It's all thanks to my relationship with Martial Brother. If I can get to know him, I might be able to gain some benefits." In the 10,000 years of Dongsheng continent, there were only 2 almighty cultivators who ascended. One was the founder of Xianyu cult and Zhongtai sect, and the other was the master of the small granary realm. This almighty cultivator came from another continent 1,500 years ago. No one knew his origins. However, after he came to Dongsheng continent, he did not establish his own sect. Instead, he opened up a small world. Before this cultivator ascended, he had a hobby, which was to collect secret manuals of techniques, treasures, and spirit herbs. The small granary realm was not isolated from the world. Instead, it opened up once every 60 years and invited fated people to be guests. Anyone who attended the banquet could take away an item before leaving. Sung Tsong Luan also had this thought. He warmly invited Taoist Nun Wei to sit in the temple and served her tea. He was quite thoughtful and tried to get information from her. Taoist Nun Wei had a cold temperament and was not good with words. Her original intention was to ask for help. After exchanging a few pleasantries, she revealed her intention. After Sung Tsong Luan heard it, he was stunned. He subconsciously straightened his body and pointed to the north. He asked, "Martial Nephew, are you talking about that Taoist Zhang from the Deep Abyss sect?" Taoist Nun Wei saw his surprised expression and frowned. Could it be that this person is very famous? Sung Tsong Luan stroked his beard and took a look at Taoist Nun Wei. He then lowered his gaze and said, "His reputation is indeed a little. It is rumored that this person is not to be trifled with." Taoist Nun Wei was unhappy. She sneered and said, "How is he not to be trifled with? I have seen this person before. It is not like he has 3 heads and 6 arms." Sung Tsong Luan coughed and shook his head. He said, "Martial Nephew has been in the 8 Tassels Mountain for a long time. I do not know about this person. Oh, have you heard of that Chu State Preceptor Hui Xian ancestor?" Taoist Nun Wei said, "This person is a little famous." Sung Tsong Luan said, 20 years ago, 2 disciples of Hui Xian ancestor Hui Xian became enemies with that sect head Zhang. They agreed to a duel and even invited 3 Yuanine peers to help, who knew that in the battle at the Beimasi realm, the 5 of them joined hands and were actually unable to defeat him. Only the eldest disciple of Hui Xian ancestor Wang Guangyuan managed to escape. It can be imagined how powerful this person is. Taoist Nun Wei revealed a look of surprise. She was not ignorant. To be able to fight 1 against 5, not to mention the depth of his Taoist skills, he must have some powerful Taoist techniques. Otherwise, it would be impossible for him to do so. She said coldly, "No wonder this person is so arrogant." Sung Tsong Luan sighed. "If it is only so, it is still fine." Later on, That person took out 3 top-grade profound weapons. I heard that it was only to exchange for 3 elixirs. Think about it, if it was not for his extraordinary background, how could he casually take out these 3 magical weapons? When Taoist Nun Wei heard this, she suddenly grabbed the handle of her horsetail whisk. She had previously said in front of Zhang Yan that she was willing to exchange 3 profound weapons for him. It turned out that this person did not care at all. At that time, he was probably laughing at her in secret. When she thought of this, she suddenly felt a surge of anger and humiliation. Seng Songluan looked at her and asked tentatively, "If martial nephew wants to get a disciple from this person, I am afraid it will not be an easy task. How about I find you a disciple with spiritual intelligence?" Even though he was willing to help Taoist Nun Wei, it was also because he wanted to gain some benefits. He was not willing to provoke a strong enemy like Zhang Yan. Taoist Nun Wei had a stubborn temper. She said coldly, "I do not believe that with my reputation in Shao Tsongjing, I cannot get a female disciple. If Priest Tsing cannot help, then forget it." When she finished, she brushed her sleeves and walked out. Seng Songluan was not willing to let her go just like that. He quickly stood up and said loudly, "Martial nephew, please wait." When senior brother Lu was still alive, he once said that he owed a favor to a disciple in Shao Tsongjing. I thought of a way to repay it and have long wanted to pay my respects. It was just that at that time his Xian skill had not been completed and he had enemies outside. He did not dare to leave this place easily, so he was delayed. Since martial nephew has something to do, as your martial uncle, how can I not help you? Taoist Nun Wei stopped and turned around to ask, "Martial Uncle Lu, how are you going to help me?" Seng Songluan smiled and said while twirling his beard, "I have a brilliant plan. Martial nephew, please return to your seat first." After she returned to her seat, Seng Songluan said, "I dare to ask, does martial nephew want that female disciple to be your disciple no matter what, even if you have to give up some treasures?" Taoist Nun Wei waved her hand and said, "Martial Uncle Lu, if you have something to say, martial nephew has made up his mind to take that disciple." Seng Songluan nodded and said that Taoist Zhang took out 3 profound weapons in exchange for 3 spirit medicines, which are Crouching Earth Lotus, Ghost Sunflower, and Snake Ring Jewel. As long as he takes out these 3 items, won't martial nephew's matter be easily solved? Taoist Nun Wei said doubtfully, "Is this feasible?" Seng Songluan smiled and said, "Think about it, that Taoist Zhang is willing to give away 3 profound weapons. He only has 1 disciple in the Xian light realm who does not have great aptitude and doesn't seem to be a successor of the orthodoxy. Why would he be reluctant?" Taoist Nun Wei also felt that it was reasonable. She liked Wang Kaiwei because of her talent in flying daggers. In terms of aptitude, she was inferior to her other sister, so she nodded unconsciously. Seng Songluan observed her expression from the side, and seeing that she was moved, he put on a serious expression and said, "Martial nephew also knows of Ai's background. I happen to have some Crouching Earth Lotus and Ghost Sunflower here, but I'm afraid it's not enough. I wonder if there are any in Small Granary Realm? Martial nephew can go back and look for them." Taoist Nun Wei said proudly, "What kind of spirit medicine is there in my Small Granary Realm? There is no need for martial Uncle Tseng to spend money." Seng Songluan smiled and said, "Even so, we still need to be prepared. Martial nephew, why don't you contact your friends from all over and go to Hanyuan together to strengthen your reputation? With such soft and hard methods, I'm not afraid that Taoist Zhang will not agree." He also had his own plans. With enemies outside, it was very inconvenient to move around. If he used the name of Small Granary Realm to go somewhere, that person would have to think thrice if he wanted to touch him again in the future. Chapter 658. In the blink of an eye, a month had passed. On the surface, Hanyuan Gate looked no different from before, but in reality, it was much more heavily guarded than before. This move was not to guard against Taoist Nun Wei, but because the Wang sisters had already reached the stage where the medicine would condense into a pill. Zhang Yan had also taken time out to personally protect them these few days, so he could not allow the slightest mishap inside or outside. To prevent any accidents from happening, even Zhang Boyan personally went to guard the gate. Under Zhang Yan's 20 years of management, Songju Peak was no longer what it used to be. The formation gate was as strong as a celestial city, and every formation was guarded by a disciple he had personally taught. Without the token given by the sect master, anyone flying in the sky would definitely be struck down by the formation thunder. It was rare to see such emphasis on the defense of the gate in Dongsheng continent. Zhang Boyan sat in a temple on the left of the gate. This place guarded the mountain path, and anyone who entered or exited would be immediately detected by him. At this moment, he was holding the sadness and happiness puppet in his hand, turning it over and over, his eyes flashing with uncertainty. A voice came from outside, "Master, your disciple is here." Zhang Boyan did not even raise his head, and said in a deep voice, "Come in." Footsteps sounded and a tall, handsome youth walked into the hall. It was Zhao Yang, who went up the mountain alone to become a disciple at a young age. He came up and bowed respectfully, saying, "Master, your disciple has successfully opened his meridians." After becoming a disciple of Zhang Boyan, he only started to cultivate the source-seeking scripture at the age of 14, practicing the method of splitting the soul. Because there were no demons in the mountain, Zhang Yan had strict rules that forbade killing, so he could only suck the essence and blood of demons. After a few years, his essence had become extremely strong. 20 days ago, he went to the Jade Elixir pool to open his meridians, and just now was the day he came out. Zhang Boyan's gaze roamed around his body, and he shouted, "Show me your pulse." Zhao Yang responded, and he activated his technique. After 10 breaths, a thick yellow cloud appeared on his body. A thick yellow cloud gradually appeared on his body. It was like sand that gathered together and did not disperse for a long time. Zhang Boyan's eyes flashed. Zhao Yang's was probably of the 5 elements. It was clear to see, in terms of character he was above average. He thought to himself, "This disciple is indeed fated with me." He had already thought about it. If Zhao Yang could open a high-grade pulse, naturally he would try to find a good cultivation technique for him so that he wouldn't waste his talent. If it was a low-grade pulse, then he would only be able to teach him some shallow cultivation techniques. In the future, he would only be able to order him around like a servant. It was good that he could be his successor in the future. He threw the doll of sorrow and joy into Zhao Yang's arms and said, "Take it, I'll give you this magical treasure. From tomorrow onwards, I'll teach you my sex Xian technique." Zhao Yang was overjoyed and grabbed the doll tightly. He knelt down and kowtowed, "Disciple thanks master." At first, he was a little disappointed that he couldn't become Zhang Yan's disciple. However, Zhang Boyan was a Yuanying Zhenren after all, so he felt lucky. After all these years of contact, he felt that his master was really deep and immeasurable. Zhao Yang's father was from the Fuyang sect, and he had personally seen him fight with a few people from the same sect. However, even if those few people worked together, they wouldn't be his match. Thinking about the future, with a wave of his hand, he would be like Zhang Boyan, having thousands of demons by his side. His heart was filled with passion. At this moment, the mountain bell rang. Zhang Boyan listened and got up. "The manor head has come out." Zhao Yang looked towards the peak and said, "After the 2 senior sisters form their pellets, our Deep Abyss sect will have 2 more pellet transformation cultivators." Zhang Boyan heard the envy in his words and scoffed, "Pellet transformation cultivators aren't much. With your talent, as long as you cultivate hard, you will be able to step into that realm in 100 years. Zhao Yang said respectfully, "My disciple will certainly not disgrace master." Zhang Boyan chuckled. Zhao Yang was young, but he already had some shrewdness. However, many of the techniques of the Netherworld Spring sect required people with a sharp mind to cultivate. This kind of mind was more to Zhang Boyan's liking. He said, "If that's the case, there's no need for tomorrow. You can come back with me now." With a turn of his body, he'd already transformed into a strand of thick yellow smoke that surged into the air. He swept Zhao Yang up and returned to the abode. In the cave abode of Songju Peak, the Wang sisters' faces were glowing. White smoke was coming out of their noses, and all the acupoints on their bodies were emitting a dense mist that floated 3 feet around them. Just a moment ago, the two of them had formed their golden cores at almost the same time. At this moment, they were still dispelling the surging killing intent in their bodies. Zhang Yan checked and found that the two sisters had formed their 4th stage golden cores. Although they had no chance of entering the top 3 stages, their foundations were still solid. If they cultivated hard, it would not be an extravagant hope for them to reach Yuanying after 200 or 300 years. If they wanted to advance further, it would depend on their own luck. After a moment, Wang Kating was the first to wake up. After looking inside her body, she knew that from now on, she was already a core transformation cultivator. A wave of joy immediately surged in her heart. She directly bowed down on the praying mat and said, "Disciple thanks Master for protecting me." Zhang Yan smiled and said, "Kai Wei seems to have obtained a fated chance. I'm afraid that she will wake up later. Don't disturb her and wait patiently. I still have something to talk to you two about later." Wang Kating lightly agreed and sat back down. She carefully felt the various differences after forming her golden core and before. Just now that Wang Kaiwei had formed her golden core, she felt the killing blade hidden in the acupoint between her eyebrows jump slightly. Almost in an instant, a cultivation technique flowed into her mind. Ever since she obtained this killing true weapon, she had been practicing the yin-yang origin flying blade of the Chongyue True Temple. It was only because of her cultivation level that she couldn't learn a superior cultivation technique. Now that she had stepped into the core transformation stage, the magic treasure impatiently passed on the cultivation technique to her. Wang Kaiwei had heard that using the opportunity of breaking through to the next realm to comprehend a cultivation technique could yield twice the result with half the effort. Therefore, she didn't miss the opportunity and carefully comprehended it. When she came out of her meditative state, she found that 6 hours had passed. She hurriedly stood up and apologized. "Kaiwei is afraid that Master has been waiting for a long time." Zhang Yan smiled and said, "It's all right. Fated chances are hard to come by and can't be sought. Kaiwei, it's a good thing that you were able to grasp it." Speaking up to this point, his gaze swept over the two of them and said, "After entering the core transformation stage, the two of you can practice divine abilities. The divine abilities that I'm good at are difficult to practice, and according to the sect's rules, I can't teach them lightly. Fortunately, there are a few divine abilities in the Jade Shade sect that can be practiced without the need of a fusion cultivation technique. I'll teach them to you now. Take them back and diligently comprehend them." He waved his hand and 2 jade slips flew down. Wang Kating raised her wrist and received them. She inserted a strand of spiritual energy into them and a cultivation technique appeared in front of her eyes. After looking at it, she discovered that this divine ability was called Burning Orchid and Wormwood together. This technique cultivated a strand of clear energy in the ancestral aperture. When fighting with someone, if the opponent used a powerful Dao technique or divine ability, she only needed to give up this energy and it would turn into essence Qi of the same origin. It would no longer cause any changes. It was very strange. The only flaw of this technique was that after using it, it would take a long time to cultivate it. However, when this energy was released, it was like an orchid or musk. It had an endless delicate fragrance and was misty like a cloud immortal. Not only did it look good, but it also didn't have any worldly aura. It was exactly what she wanted, so she happily accepted it. Wang Kaiwei took the jade slip and examined it. A supernatural power also appeared in her mind. This technique was called Accumulating Feathers and Sinking Boat. This supernatural power was completely used in fights of magical powers. Normally, one could absorb the magical power that one cultivated into a bead. When fighting with others, one could release the qi and subdue the enemy in the blink of an eye. However, this technique had a similar flaw to the Burning Orchid and Wormwood together. After accumulating mana and using it once, one would need to spend time to refine it again. However, she already had the Demon Slayer blade, so this technique had another killing move. Seeing that both of them were happy, Zhang Yan smiled and said, I said before that whoever has the highest core realm can go to Donghua. Now that both of you have achieved the 4th grade gold core, I might as well let you go back together so that you can take care of each other on the way. However, there are thunderbolts blocking the way back and forth in the open sea. I'll give you the Dragon Country's ocean boat. It's already the end of the year, so there's no need to rush to leave. Go back and consolidate your cultivation. After spring, you can choose a suitable day to go out to sea. With a snap of his fingers, a ball of smoke wrapped around a small boat and flew out. He had already given the Dragon Country's ocean boat. The two sisters hurriedly and carefully received it. Zhang Yan waved his sleeve and said, "Both of you can leave now." The Wang sisters acknowledged and bowed deeply before retreating from the cave. After the two of them left, they were both excited and used their core fiend flight technique. After circling the mountain for more than 2 hours, they finally floated down the peak together. At this moment, someone came up from the mountain path. It was Chu Mu Ran. He looked at the smoke at the feet of the two girls and asked with a smile, "Martial nieces, what grade of core realm have you achieved?" The Wang sisters floated down from the cloud of smoke. On the street, Wang Kaiwei said, "We've both achieved the 4th grade gold core. We've embarrassed ourselves in front of Martial Uncle Chu." When Chu Mu Ran heard that both of them had achieved the 4th grade gold core, he praised, "Martial nieces, you are indeed talented." From his point of view, it was extremely difficult to achieve a golden core of the upper 3 grades. It was rare even in the 5 major sects, and those who could achieve it were all direct disciples. He himself was barely at the 6th grade, so if he could achieve the 4th grade gold core, he would most likely achieve the Yuanying realm the next day. However, the Wang sisters didn't think much of themselves. Master Zhang Yan aside, there were only a few people in the past 10,000 years who had achieved the 1st grade gold core. Eldest senior sister Lu Yenyi had achieved the 2nd grade gold core, and Wei Zihong had entered the sect later than them, but he had achieved the 3rd grade gold core. In comparison, the 4th grade gold core wasn't even worth mentioning. Thus, they only took Chu Mu Ran's words as a courtesy and thanked him before leaving the mountain. Chu Mu Ran watched the two of them leave and suddenly sighed. He shook his head and continued up the mountain. When he arrived at Zhang Yan's cave, he was called in after sending a message. When he entered the inner room, he bowed and said, "Greetings, sect head senior brother." Zhang Yan smiled and asked, "Junior brother, is there anything you need from me?" Chu Mu Ran hurriedly said, "Senior brother, you asked me to find out about that Taoist nun Wei's background. I've already gotten some news. That person's background is indeed not small. She's a disciple of that small warehouse realm." Zhang Yan's eyes flashed and he nodded. She's indeed a disciple of that realm. After all, he had been in the Dongsheng continent for more than 20 years. In order to search for pill ingredients, he paid attention to collecting secret information from all over the world. When he heard Wei Shuling mention the 2 words "you country," that day, he had already guessed her identity. This was because the small warehouse realm was within this country's borders. Chu Mu Ran said, "The disciples of the small warehouse realm have a wide network of friends. The last time that Taoist nun Wei asked for a disciple, she probably wouldn't give up. Senior brother, you should be on your guard." You're tuning in to the Passion Pages YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.